Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, dear esteemed guests. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you to the 2040 Future Skills event organised by ACS International School, Doha. We are delighted to have you all here as we explore the critical skills required to thrive in the future world. As we look towards the future, we recognise that the landscape of work and education is constantly evolving. At ACS International School, we are committed to preparing our students for success in the world of tomorrow. We believe that cultivating a diverse range of skills is crucial in enabling our students to navigate the challenges and opportunities of the future. We are thrilled to have experts from various fields join us today to share their insights on future skills and the importance of interdisciplinary education. This event promises to be a valuable opportunity to gain new perspectives, network with fellow professionals, and engage in meaningful discussions. On behalf of ACS International School, Doha, we extend our sincere appreciation to each and every one of you for being a part of this event. We hope you find this event informative, thought-provoking, and inspiring. Thank you and welcome to the 2040 Future Skills event. I am John Rawlinson, Principal at ACS Doha International School. I'm excited to be here with you. We will take a glimpse into the future and talk about the future of work and the skills that will be in high demand for 2040. The world of work is changing faster than ever before. Advances in technology and globalization are transforming the way we work and the jobs that we do. With the changing job market comes new career opportunities. Some of the jobs that will be in high demand in 2040 include data analysts, renewable energy technicians, sustainability professionals, and cybersecurity experts. These are just a few examples of the emerging fields that we'll explore today, and the opportunities don't stop there. As technology continues to advance, new careers will be created. Some of these careers include, and are not exclusive to, augmented reality architects. With the increasing use of augmented reality in various industries, there'll be a growing demand for architects who specialize in designing and building augmented reality environments. Urban agriculturists. As cities grow more crowded, urban agriculturists will become increasingly important in helping to produce food in urban areas. Digital detox therapists. As more people become addicted to their devices and social media, there'll be a growing need for therapists who specialize in helping people detox from digital overload. Waste data analysts. With a growing emphasis on sustainability and waste reduction, there'll be a need for experts who can analyze waste data to identify trends and develop strategies for reducing waste. AL ethicist. With the increasing use of artificial intelligence in various industries, there'll be a need for experts who can ensure that AL is used ethically and in compliance with regulatory standards. Virtual reality experience designer. With the increasing use of virtual reality in entertainment and other industries, there'll be a growing demand for designers who can create immersive virtual reality experiences. Reminds me of an old Arnold Schwarzenegger film that was remade recently. With these changes come new opportunities and new ways of working. We need to help our children prepare for them. With these skills comes the need for new soft skills, the need to teach courage. How do we teach our children courage? How do we help our children to create positive change? Ever so more than IQ and EQ, cultural intelligence is now viewed as a key indicator in the success of an individual. Focus training. Data-informed research suggests that the skills of listening is a key indicator for a good leader. Yet how often is this skill taught or even practiced? As educators and parents, we have a responsibility to help our children prepare for the ever-changing landscape. And that starts with understanding what the job market could look like in years to come. We need them to become ready. This event will take an in-depth look at the jobs of the future and the skills that will be essential for success in 2040. Today, we are bringing together award-winning industry experts, future education thinkers, and renowned researchers to provide you with valuable insights into the changing job market. Our speakers will share their expertise on the jobs that will be in high demand and the skills you'll need to succeed. Hold hands as we take the first steps together in discovering the unknown, unlocking each child's potential and navigating the future job market with confidence. Today's agenda, there is an iPad just outside where sign-up was. If you have any questions, please feel free during the interval to type those questions in there and we will respond accordingly, or our experts will respond. With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Harisson, our first guest speaker.
Thank you, John, and welcome, everyone. I have the privilege of going first to set the stage for some of the people you'll hear today who know a lot more about this than I do. But what I do know is about education, and it's exciting to be a part of that conversation. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about people skills and technology, and where you put the comma matters in those three words. Because here you'll see a giant, kind of scary-looking robot, but he's holding hands with the principal violinist for the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And that's a metaphor for what I think is important about what we'll be talking about today throughout our conferences. Forecasting the future is going to look like that. Maybe not exactly like that, because he's kind of a scary robot. What you can't see behind him are the people who are actually working the robot. And those are the people that I suspect are the jobs of the future. And learning how to hold hands with technology as people is something we've been doing for a while now, but which will increasingly become important when we're thinking about the future. I'd like to play a game with you to start, because one of my favorite features in the New York Times these days is a picture, and it says, what's going on in this picture? So have a look at this and think about what's going on in this picture. You can ask yourself, first of all, what do I see here? And then you can ask yourself, what's happening? So just have a little look and use your visual thinking to see what's there. Right? And then once you've identified some of the things that you do see, ask yourself, what's happening here? And now then, would you check your theory with a friend? If you're sitting nearby someone and you can talk to them, just turn around for a minute and say, this is what I see, and this is what I think is happening. If you're by yourself, scoot over and make a friend, introduce yourself. We need to have a conversation about what's happening here. What do you see? So what do you see there? So you see a police car. You can guess about where this is. You see Chinese characters, but you also see Arabic characters. You see the street name. If you look very closely, you can see it looks like a U.S. telephone number, and it's area code 415. Anybody know that zip code, that area code? San Francisco. So this is happening in San Francisco, 11 o'clock at night. And it's a bit of a fuzzy picture because it's a screen capture from Twitter. 2.5 million people have looked at this little video that I've screenshotted. If Twitter's working today, this morning it was off, but we'll see if that comes back on later today. And then in front of it is a little car that's called Cruise, which is one of the 3 companies that's licensed to have driverless cars in San Francisco. But what makes this interesting is the police have stopped the car because it's driving without its lights on, which is a traffic offense. What you can't see is that having detained the car, the police officer stepped to the front of it and the car promptly drove off because it didn't know what to do. So it drove off and the police had to chase it. And my very favorite part of the story is the man you can hear if you listen to the video, the man who says, I have to take a look at this. This is going to be fun. And what happened next was that the police did detain the car. They called the people to say what was going on, and everything was fine. What you don't see, if you take this as a robot taxi or an autonomous vehicle or a driverless car, which didn't have a passenger or a driver, are the number of people involved in getting it to work. And the fact that in the end, a human being had to call a human being on an old-fashioned telephone to find out why the driverless car didn't have its lights on and tried to evade the police in a traffic stop. So technology can be useful, but it also can be dangerous in terms of how those things work together. And there are a lot of people behind it. And interestingly enough, some of the oldest technology of all is important here, because what may finally undo driverless cars is not the complications of the technology, but the bankruptcy of the business model. Because think about it, taxi drivers only get paid when they're working, but there are a team of about 60 people who are supporting this driverless car, so actually the economics of it don't work at all. So people, skills, and technology sometimes go in different directions. John is talking about some of the hottest new jobs. This is the hottest new job, at least for a few weeks anyway, an AI whisperer. You're going to hear a lot from Dr. Ghanim later about ChatGPT, and one of the things that you can make money with doing right now, and good money, is learning how to drive the thing, so that when you're asking it the right questions to get the right answers from it. I'm not sure this will be a very long-lived job, because if you remember the days before we used Google all the time, there was a very hot job almost called a Google whisperer, because people didn't know what to type in the search engine. So you can make good money telling people what to search for, which now then we just take for granted. But for the moment, you could do this if you wanted to do it as the hottest new tech job. We've been doing some research into what is it that employers want in terms of the employees of the future. Working with YouGov, which is an important surveying organization in the UK, and with the IB Schools and Colleges Association in the United Kingdom as well, we asked small and medium business owners, the people who really drive economies, what is it that you're looking for in your future workers? And this is what the research has shown, that just having subject knowledge is no longer enough to thrive in a world of work and life, and that knowledge is obsolete if students do not know how to apply it. And the best way for students to develop these skills is through learning about the real world. So John mentioned IQ and EQ. Recently, Peter Rudin has talked about AIQ. And I'm sorry, Dr. Ghanim, it's not about artificial intelligence quotient, but it's about applied intelligence. Because what's really important for the future of work and for the jobs of the future, the skills you need to have are not just intelligence, cognitive ability, or emotional intelligence, the ability to get along with others and to advance your own personal causes, but it's how you're going to use what it is, the things that you know. That's vitally important for us all. Our research has shown that the most important skill to learn is the skill of being human. If you look at all of these industries, manufacturing, construction, retail, finance and accounting, hospitality and leisure, legal, IT, telecoms, media marketing, medical and health, education, transportation is an interesting one, we could come back there, real estate and other industries, the blue bar is always higher, and the blue bar says the most important skill is to develop people into human beings rather than turn them into workers. Because small and medium-sized businesses particularly believe that if you get them the right kind of people, they'll teach them the job, and the job may change. But you cannot teach, too late to teach you to be human by the time you get to be a worker. That is potentially an important job of schools, which has always been a little bit the case. When I was studying to be a teacher, we called it the hidden curriculum. These days, it's the most important and perhaps the only curriculum that matters. We broke skills into these three broad categories of professional skills, getting your job done kinds of things, subject matter skills, the things you need to know, the cognitive knowledge about your job and your work, or personal skills, how to get along with others and how to have the characteristics as a person you need to be successful. And you can see how these bars look also. The most important thing there were personal skills. And I doubt that if you look on your university transcript, you will see a grade for that. Or I doubt if you attend a modern high school, even our high schools at ACS, You'll not have a class in personal skills, nor a grade in it. And yet that people say that's what the most important thing is, which poses some interesting challenges for education. You're going to hear how that works from Pam in terms of the youngest students, from Victoria, and how you develop opportunities to really get the skills you need. All of those things need to happen with and in and around schools in ways that we probably haven't caught up to fully. One executive at a medium-sized company said that some of this is what Harry Potter would have called old magic. That if you're hardworking and work well as a team, if you're conscientious, if you have human qualities, you're likely to succeed. And that's what our research is showing us in terms of what people are saying about it. It's not our research only. The National Foundation for Educational Research in the UK has a 10-year project that's looking into the skills imperative for 2035. We're going to be 5 years ahead of them because we're looking at 2040. But their point is also that if you want to have a workforce that's skilled, what do you need to be able to do? What are the things that are important for that workforce? And they've already reached some tentative conclusions about what that means. They've said, for example, that human reasoning and interaction will be important in all the areas of job growth, health, social care, and education, as well as those areas associated with the future of technology, such as digital technology and green industries. And that the three things that are the most important going forward are the things that for our high demand skills and jobs for the next 15 years will be problem solving, decision making, critical thinking and analysis, and creativity and innovation. You'll hear more from David about that a little bit later, how those things that people are passionate about and care for are the ones which will provide them job security into the future. So what does it mean to be uniquely human? And I'll propose just 4 quick things that I say are important for us going forward that I think define the agenda for education in the future. It's a little bit education jargony, so I'll try to unpack them for you a little bit. The first is associative cognition. Those are all the things that I would say are machine resistant in terms of learning. So being able to coordinate many facets and to form a coherent whole out of our experience and to navigate unpredictable landscapes, which is what our poor autonomous vehicle could not do when the police stopped it for having its lights off. That had never happened to it before, so it didn't know what to do. As human beings, that's what our specialty is, as a matter of fact, or it needs to be, is being able to figure out what to do when this thing hasn't happened before. A lot of the skills and jobs that we hold as adults, I would say, could be classified as leaving us sort of cognitively vulnerable, because it's exposed some of the things which will no longer be important in a post-robotic, digital, globalized economy. Performing complex calculations, there are things that machines will do better than we can do. And so some professions like medicine, law, accounting, trade are all vulnerable in some aspects of their work. So being able to make sense of a big thing, associative cognition, is important. The second is an appetite for complexity. And that's different than being complicated. Many jobs today you do very well for being able to manage complications. But as a matter of fact, machines are better at complicated than human beings, but they're not as good at complexity. So if you can solve the problem with a recipe and with rules, with an algorithm, like who decides what ads appear on your Twitter feed, for example, if Twitter ever works again, those are the things that machines do better than we. And that includes things like the way we've organized many companies hierarchically, that there's a command and control structure. So that used to work, but it's not going to work anymore. Because technology can disrupt the rules and processes that we rely on. So you might actually be able to teach a car to drive, kind of, if it's going in the same place it's already been all the time. But you can't teach a car how to deal with a disruptive business model like Uber or Airbnb. Those are the things which the jobs of the future will require us to be able to do. Having said that, it's vitally important that we develop algorithmic intelligence, that we understand what machines can and can't do and how they work in this brave new world. So our vocabulary has to include things like robotic process automation and data science and neural networks and machine learning and bots and what they can and can't do. And I don't mean the kind of bots like the big blue guy at the first slide, the bots that are working inside your computer to do the work that administrative people used to do. Qatar is a leader in this field, as a matter of fact. The Qatar Computing Research Institute that works in partnership with the Hamad bin Khalifa University is really committed to the idea of transforming Qatar's economy into a knowledge-based economy. And so that will only work if we're able to find out how the algorithms work, what they do. You'll hear a little bit about the ethics of AI, and John has already mentioned that as well. But the machine will only do what we tell it to. And we have to understand what we've done and what we want to be able to do with it. And the last one is not very technologically sounding, but it perhaps is the most important, is the achievement of wisdom. And wisdom is a very old-fashioned word, but I think education should be geared toward wisdom as much as it is knowledge. We have to be careful to focus on not just the skills at the expense of the school communities and all the relational opportunities that you get in school, which teaches you how to be human. Education is way more nuanced and enriching than just the development of skills. As important as those skills and knowledge are, it's the dispositions that you have as a person that are going to be important. And it's wisdom that allows you to make good decisions and live a fulfilled and thrilling life, which is really what we want for our children, not just that they can provide enough money to support themselves and their families. What is it that you really need to be able to do in the world? Well, this is the new car. So we saw the cruise car in the beginning. And those cars, if you've ever been inside one or followed a journalist while they drive around, it's interesting because it is just like the car you may have driven to get here today. There is a steering wheel, and it's moving by itself, right? The steering goes along. There's nobody sitting in the front seat. It's quite alarming when you see them, as a matter of fact, and especially if you're a policeman who's standing there and the car drives off, although you want to talk to the person inside. Not sure whom to charge for that offense. This is where Cruise is going. They have 6 of these vehicles ready to roll off the line. There's not even a steering wheel. Because as a matter of fact, the steering wheel isn't needed because humans aren't in charge of it, because the car only goes in a preset path, which is quite safe because it's encountered all those things before. So an autonomous vehicle is going to be looking more like this, that doesn't have a steering wheel because a human being isn't needed to provide that input. What I want to propose today is that really what the job of education is not to be in the car or even to build the car, but it's to know where to steer the car. And one of the books that's been very important for me recently is called The Future of International Education. And Simon Walker has said that in that book, education needs to innovate in regard to how it assesses and trains the ability of children to steer. Because that's what's uniquely human. Being able to decide where the car needs to go, to cope with the fact that it hasn't been there before, because machines are not really good at that, but we are. And we need to be able to teach our children how to do that effectively. What does that look like? Well, it means really important things like determining grit and agility and agency. It means being able to have a bigger picture for education and the skills of the future. Olli-Pekka Heinonen, who's the former Minister of Education for Finland and is now the Director General of the IB, put it really this way, and I'll close with his words. He says, education isn't only about knowledge and skills and values and attitudes that students should get, but it's also learning to value what the world is asking from each of us. If humanity is to survive the climate crisis, if it's to thrive in a digital world, if it's to become more democratic, more inclusive, more progressive, we need students to think critically, to look for solutions and to take on these challenges. And, this is my part in the play, we need inspiring teachers who can help them each step of the way. At ACS, we believe that this means we're getting children who are ready not just to have skills and to get a job, but they're able to change the world. And that means that we want children who are confident individuals, who are caring contributors and effective learners. And if you do that, then I believe that humans and machines will get along just fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robert. I'd now like to invite Pam Mundy to the stage.
I love that John's giving the direction. It's the one on the right. You can see where I am in technology. Okay, listening to Robert, it's really interesting because I feel that I am living the future now. You'll see from my biography that I work in NEOM, which is the new gigacity in Saudi Arabia. And every day I spend my life with robots. not just the human ones. Unfortunately, some of them aren't quite geared up for what we're doing at the moment. So the ones that water the plants frequently and often crash into the tables. But actually, that is the way of the world. And I've got very used to it. In the driverless car, Robert, that you were talking about, we now have a prototype. I'm not doing one-upmanship, but we have a prototype of a flying taxi. I can tell you now, there is not a chance that I am getting into a flying taxi unless somebody has sorted it out. But actually, what we have got to look at is where all of this starts. And for me, it's with the very, very youngest children. I spent a lot of my life and my career thinking about the fact that very young children are often overlooked because they're little, because they're not doing big, important things like examinations, like grades. What they are doing is creating the future for us. And I love this comment from Robert McCammon. This is the blueprint of the mind. As soon as a baby is born, and all of you here today, I assume, or most of you will have children of your own, you know how fascinating they are. Usually the first one, the second one possibly less fascinating because you've seen it all before. But actually, there's that little girl with those two animals, wants to be as close to find out everything she can as possible. And she's doing it with love. And that's what we have to do as educators and as parents, to really recognize that the future is here and now. Because no amount of looking at a crystal ball to see what the future will hold will really tell us. And if we're not careful, the future will have happened before we've allowed these children to have the now. That is the human element. So what do you get when you get a new child, a new baby? Well, I believe that this is what you get. You get a child with incredible capability, rich in so many ways. All of the pieces that are creating the future now, all of those people who are inventing these amazing robots were once tiny children, and we do forget that. Sometimes say to children, be very careful with adults. They used to be children, so they know what it's like. May have forgotten. But we have gifted children, not gifted in the traditional sense of the word gifted and talented, but already gifted to be able to find out everything about the world. And for that, we need gifted teachers, gifted adults who understand the world and the mind of a very small child. We've also got to remember that we've inherited something too. I don't know if any of you are aware, there's an amazing early childhood framework for learning in New Zealand. It's called the Te Whāriki. If I've got any New Zealanders in, I've probably just completely mispronounced that. But the belief is that children come to us and already have the learning. They spend their earliest years with you as their parents. They've already learned a huge amount. So what they bring to us are the gifts and talents of all of their ancestors. The scary piece is we are going to be their ancestors. So how do we balance that? The future, the past, all in one. How do we make this an amazing world? Well, let's have a look at what's out there. So there is a traditional belief, and I've seen it many times, that the best way to educate children is to sit them at a desk and teach them things. I disagree. Early childhood doesn't represent adult life. Sitting in little cubicles, sitting at desks all day, that's not what exploration in the future is about. All of these amazing people who've developed Twitter, who've developed AI, who've developed ChatGPT, which is the word of the moment, as you've heard already this morning, they played with things. They explored, they put their hands on, and they found out what did and didn't work. Just in the same way that you watch a very small child with a glass of water and they're tipping it. Now, we think, great, they're going to throw that all over the floor, so I'm going to be really cross about it. Actually, most of the time, depending on the look in their eye, it's to see just how far can I go before this water tips. I think it's about surface tension, but a 3-year-old won't tell you that. So this is how children understand their world and the place that they have in it. And of course, now we do have the AI generation. I used to say the app generation, but we've moved way on from that. So here we've got children who are already literate with a laptop, who already know how things work better than I do. I hope I'm not the only grandmother in the room who's had their granddaughter sigh quietly, take the phone away and say, "Can I show you how to do that, Granny?" She does it kindly because she knows at the end of it, her birthday gifts may rest on me, but she's still very helpful. I now have it done for me by 3- and 4-year-olds. So here's Ian Pearson telling us if we're not careful, by about 2040, we don't need to worry about having a brain because there's a laptop that will have backed it up, so that will do it for us. No, I think Robert's right. I think there'll still be the human element, there has to be, and at the end of the day, we're in charge. But I want you to look really carefully at this little girl. This isn't a set-up photograph. This is a little child in an art gallery. She saw the beautiful ballerina, and she wanted to do the same thing. No one said you need to stand on one leg while I take a photograph of you, because most children today are very used to us photographing them. You know, they do something for us or they make something, and they immediately come to us and smile and pose ready. She didn't. Look at this. She's modeling exactly the way that the adult is standing on the plinth. She is the ballerina. She's living now her potential future. So we don't know what those jobs will be. You saw that Robert was saying potential jobs for the future. John talked about it too. I'm going to show you some of the jobs that actually exist now that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. This little girl needs more than just the basic learning. She needs more than the examinations. That's important. That's your ticket to ride. She needs something that allows her to express her freedom. Because in this big, brave new world, it's the explorers and the pioneers that will be the ones that will take us into that world. If you've got 5 minutes today, it's worth having a look on YouTube. You can Google it, of course. There must be a new word for that now. To a website, to a YouTube video called Shift Happens. It's reproduced every year. And it will show you very quickly, in a few minutes, the changes that are taking place in the world even now. It's updated every year because the change is so rapid. But you won't see this there. These are the jobs that are happening now. These are not future jobs, they're now. I don't remember when I was a little girl saying, do you know what, when I grow up, I'd love to be a microgravity body development specialist. Probably couldn't even say it. That job, that's someone who actually works with astronauts to help them exercise in space. You'll hear later on this morning from Dr. Phill Carvel, one of his roles was to do just that. Executive sensei. Next time you go for an interview, if there's somebody sitting at the table or on the Zoom or whatever it is with you, they may well be the executive sensei. They'll say nothing. They're there to sense, human sensing, of whether you and the people you're talking to might be suitable for that job. How many of the children in our nurseries, our kindergartens, our preschools now will do those jobs? Terrestrial intergalactic astronomer. Galactic Viceroy of Research Excellence. Robert, I think we have one in you. This one, and please, so many people have told me that's my boss. The Executive Director of Paranoia is a real job. Exists now. That person's job is to make sure that no other company does anything better than your company is doing, to be paranoid all the time. Amazing that those jobs are there now. By the time the children who are in early childhood classes now get to be grown up, these jobs will be old, past it. And this, I think, is critical for us all to remember. What we often try to do is restrict children to the learning that we had, that we know. We can't do that. They were born in another time, a world that we couldn't imagine. I look now at what I do. I trained as a teacher. I'm still a teacher in my heart. But I didn't train to do what I do now. Someone asked me, in fact, one of our ACS students asked me a few months ago, how did you decide to do what you're doing now? And I said, well, I wanted to be a teacher. How did you get where you are? And my answer, I have to tell you, was I have absolutely no idea, except I played with it, I looked, and I learned. So I think what we need to do is look at early childhood through a different lens. And this is about respecting our very, very youngest children. Tend to dismiss them to a large extent because they're little. It's exactly what I said at the beginning. So how do we make these children the absolute center of everything that is happening now How do we work on the future as it lives and breathes in schools every day? I think this is how. We have to look at what's right in front of us. Many, many years ago, a lady called Margaret Macmillan said those words, "The earliest years decide all." And if I had time and I could sit with you together in a nice group and have a coffee and say to you, what do you remember most about your childhood? There are very few people who will say to me, I remember sitting down and writing my letters, I remember learning my numbers, I remember doing this. You talk to me about playing, you'll talk to me about being outside, you'll talk to me about being with your friends, you'll talk to me about an amazing experience you had, or you'll talk to me about something that happened to you that wasn't good, that you've never forgotten. Anyone who knows me well knows that I will not take milk in anything. And that goes back to when I was a very little girl in nursery, and our teacher in England at the time, of course, used to put our milk for our break time against the radiators. So it was sort of half warm, half cold. It was disgusting. To this day, I cannot drink milk for that very reason. Things that happen in early childhood form the brain, the blueprint of the mind, for good or ill. It changes who and what we become as adults. It's a very sensitive time. I always think very small children should have a label on them that says handle with care, but not simply so that you don't pick them up and break them, simply so that we don't do any damage to their minds in the earliest years. And look at these two. Who knows? This one here, is he the architect of the future? Is he an explorer? Is he a discoverer? Who knows? Wouldn't it be wonderful to trace every child in the world to their final destination in terms of career or not career? You know, these children may have 15, 16 different careers in their lifetime. How wild and exciting is that? And how terrifying for us as the ancestors to be. And look at this one, the stargazer. You know, who knows where this child might go? In one of the pieces of work I'm doing at the moment, there's a project, it's called Project Moon, and it makes me laugh every time we talk about it, because I do think we're a little bit past Project Moon. I think we're on Mars now. So what I've often said is are these important things, I think. This is why early learning impacts all future learning. Children in early childhood are already the protagonists. They will be the ones who lead you. They're the ones who are interested in this, in every leaf, in every stone, in everything that they can, and I know it frightens us to death, poke their fingers into. Everything they can take apart. Never ever leave something that you really, really value with small children, because they will examine it, they will explore it, they'll take all the pieces off, and if it doesn't work, they'll probably post it into something else and you'll never find it again. I want teachers to be active noticers, not just simply making sure that children are safe, but noticing every subtle nuance of the way that young children react together, the way they work, the way they learn. There's an architect who works out in the United States, a guy called Mitch Resnick. He wrote a wonderful book called Lifelong Kindergarten, which I think is a very good idea. He designs workspaces, office spaces, for places like financial districts here. Before he creates a new one, he goes to visit different kindergartens, early childhood centres all over the world to watch how children react in a space. And he uses that information to take away and make something better for the next office space. Wow. Why isn't he just watching adults? Because he knows that the interactions of very small children, the way their mind works, is going to tell him an awful lot about how the big grown-up children work. And looking at the space that the children are in, I have lots of parents come to me and say, oh, it doesn't look like a classroom. I have no idea what a classroom is. A classroom, 4 walls, the learning environment, and this again is Loris Malaguzzi. He developed the Reggio Emilia philosophy in Italy. He said, the learning space is the third or silent teacher. If children came to school tomorrow and the adults didn't, what could they still learn? And if the answer is very little, then we're not doing the right thing. And that parents, those of you who are parents, are really authentic partners, that we hold hands together, held hands with the robot, holding hands with the teacher and the school and the educator, And that's the safety net for the very smallest children as they grow up. Are we both on the same page, or are we projecting what we'd like children to be on them when they're very, very small? I worked a few years ago at Qatar University, wonderful experience, with some newly qualified teachers. And one of them came to me at the end, she said, "Are you saying to me, Pam, that if I want my son to be a doctor, perhaps I shouldn't say that to him, I should see what he wants to be?" And I said, "Absolutely, that's exactly right. How old is your son?" She said, "Oh, I don't have any children yet." So I think, okay, great, you've decided you're having a son, he's going to be a doctor. Wow, that's amazing. And my answer, of course, to that is, you better be good at technology, because I have already seen on the billboards out there a hospital advertising that they use the robotic knife. That terrifies me if the driverless car is anything to go by. But even so, it's out there now. And then, are we looking at children in the right way? How do we view them? Some words on this slide. You'll get the slides at the end, it's fine. But there's a description, a philosophy about there being three kinds of children, particularly in early childhood settings, in classes. First of all, a sleeping and a poor child, not one who's really asleep, but actually a child who has a parent or an educator who isn't noticing, isn't an expert noticer about what this child might be and what they might do, but is actually driving them in a particular direction. You need to do this, you want to be this, you must do that. Early childhood is not a launch pad for the next stage of life. It's a here and now. And then the child that is awake, but is poor in terms of what they receive and what they learn, that's a child who's steered by adults. The adult has a clear image of what this child should learn or where they should go, but actually isn't really involving the child quite enough. Some direction, some openness, but still not there. This one, the third one, is the best one. This is a rich child, a powerful and resourceful child, where adults in their life are both visible and invisible. Visible when they need to be to teach the important skills, to support, to love, to cherish, but invisible when children need to just be allowed to get on with it and to show us where they're going in the future. I've spent many, many years with children. I still do. I just can't let go. But I know that I have wrecked so many learning situations by deciding that I will invite myself and go and join in. It's a bit like inviting yourself to someone else's table in a restaurant. Off you go, big smile. "Hi, I'd really like to play with this. I'd really like to join you." And the children give you a look that only a very small child can give to you. "Okay, you carry on. We'll go play over there. You enjoy." There is nothing more crushing, but that just shows you're interfering, you're interrupting, you're making my learning stutter. That's the time to be invisible. Because once children get hold of something in the very earliest years, it never stops growing unless we stop watering it, unless we don't give them the opportunity to follow their heart. So let's have a look at what goes on inside the living walls. Sometimes I feel that it's a secret garden in early childhood, and there are many people, it always makes me laugh when inspectors who are not used to early childhood come and visit a school, because the last place they ever want to be is with the very youngest. So this is what I believe is a crucible, a place where children can start to build the future that we're asking for. So is it a learning space? Is it a maker station? Is it a fab lab? Is it an atelier? It doesn't matter what you call it. Is it an opportunity for very small children to follow what I believe they should, which is their passions and interests alongside the stuff that we believe is important? Is there a chance for all children to represent the world in lots of different ways? I often say to parents when the child first comes to school, I just need you to know you have no more secrets, because when the children are playing house or home, or they're modeling what you do, they'll actually replay everything that you do at home. It's all over. We know everything that goes on now. but actually to build models, to make sense of the world, to make sense of things that they see on TV, conversations they overhear, and oh boy, don't they overhear the conversations that you don't want them to. A chance for them to be truly imaginative. The real innovators are the 2- and 3-year-olds. Go watch them. They're the ones who are discovering the things we haven't seen. And they follow their heart, always. Is it a world of provocations, things that will tip children into the next stage of learning? Or do we stop them and share with them the world we've already discovered? There you go, this is how you do it. Some things we have to, but there's a big world out there. I learn more from very tiny children than I ever do from any lectures that I attended. This truly is human-centered learning. And for us, it's about the meaning we help children then to make of what they're discovering. If you look at the little girl here, I love the fact that the teachers put out for her lots of things that would be interesting because she's got some soft dough there that she can play with. She said, no thanks, that's very interesting, very kind of you. I'm going to see what happens if I pop my fingers into this. Now, who knows in the future, she might not just be popping her fingers as a brain surgeon, as a neuroscientist, as someone who discovers the cure for cancer. Who knows? If we cut it off too early, she's never going to follow that pathway, and she won't follow her heart. So what we have to do is to work out, what is it? What is it this child is thinking? How do we see it? How do we notice it? What do we do with it? What are the experiences that have led this child to this point? And how can I, as the adult, help the child to make sense and take them to the next stage of their learning? Or do I interrupt it? This is really worth remembering. We have lots of filters as adults. Only a child sees things with the perfection of clarity because it hasn't got the filters that we didn't expect to see. I'm sure you've all had the embarrassing moment with your own child when they say something you really don't want them to say to an adult. What's that spot on your nose? And you, shh, please don't say that. They actually want to know, what is that spot on your nose? They're not being rude, they're asking questions about the world. No filter. And it fascinates me that the person who said this is a science fiction writer. This is a world of discovery. This is children really getting hands-on into the thinking that will change our future. See the one on the left there? It's just a very simple slide of a very, very tiny creature projected onto a wall. No one said, you must now go and learn all about these creatures. It's, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to play with it? What were they interested in? The shadow, the tracing, and then the finding out came. Phenomenal brains. And the power of imagination. Don't know what you see there. I see a clothes peg. Never had to hang anything out for a long time, but I see a clothes peg. Whole pile of them left in a classroom for the children to explore and discover. Electronic digital microscope. Look, the difference. Look at the pictures that they discovered. Look at the learning that took place. Looking at flowers from a different angle. Did you ever think you would do that? I don't know if you ever remember lying on your back and looking up at the trees and the sky. I certainly do. A different view, a different world. Let's put those pegs back. Wow. Over a week, children coming together and creating this, and using the light and the shadow that they'd used on the wall where the teacher had projected the light, the picture. This is the stuff that drives innovation. And I'd like you to look at this. To me, this sums up everything about the phenomenal brains of children in the early years. I don't know what you see. Let me interpret it for you. This is a 4-year-old. She created this over the space of a week, going back to it, perfecting it. And when she was asked by the teacher, tell me about this, tell me what it means. And this is what she said. 4-year-old, these are her words. She said, "This is the mountain of the past. It was a long time ago, and there were some animals, and they died." Her brother had lots of books on dinosaurs. That's some people in the past. You can't see them now because they've gone. And she pointed to the other side. She said, this is a mountain in the future. Her words, in the future. That's somebody climbing up. It takes a long time. That's why I made it go up. You have to climb to the future. There's some letters. I don't know what they say because I can't read yet. She actually said those words. But I copied them because in the future I can read. The teacher said, what's the bit in the middle there? She said, that's me now with my friends. I can't go to that one because that's gone. I'm going there. I promise you, that's a transcript of what the child said. A 4-year-old. Wow. Where is she going in the future? What difference would we have made if we'd said, just leave that now, it's time to go out to play? Respecting children's learning is critical. Here's Picasso, his words. It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. Amazing. This little girl, look how close she is to the work, to what she's making. She wants to be as close to that learning as she can. It's not scribble. It's her world. It's her brain. It's her mind. I'd like to leave you with this. And I am going to read it to you because I think it's important. You will teach them to fly, but they won't fly your flight. You'll teach them to dream, but they won't dream your dream. You'll teach them to live, but they won't live your life. Nevertheless, in every flight, in every life, in every dream, the print of the way you taught them will remain. I'm going to leave it there, and if that doesn't scare you, the fact that in the future, when we're all very old, they may well choose the home that someone puts us in when we can't look after ourselves. Be nice to them now. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. As a father to 3 young boys, that really resonated with me. Miss Sarah, my wife, will tell you she's father to 4 young boys, and she'll agree that the oldest child is the protagonist. I think, Rob, the secret is to hold on and embrace the whirlwind and keep those emotions, and I think that's what makes us human. Thank you both again. I'd like to invite David Harkin on stage for the next presentation, please. Welcome, David.
Good morning, everybody. How are we? All good? Can you hear me in the back of the room? Brilliant, fantastic. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I couldn't agree with you more, Pam. I did a TEDx talk, so I'm plugging my TEDx talk straight away a number of years ago. Can a 4-year-old change the world? What do you think my answer was? No? Yes? Of course it's yes. If you listen to 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, the most remarkable children on the planet who think big, dream big, they do not have a filter at all. But even at that age, one of the things that I learned preparing for that TEDx talk was that 50% of children at the age of 4 do not believe that they can change the world. Okay, 50% of children do not believe they can change the world. So there's a lot we've got to do in education, outside of education, because every child across the planet certainly should not be thinking like that at the age of 4. But look, it's an absolute pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm going to be talking about passion and the link towards skills and career decisions. But please, this is a phrase that somebody once said to me about thinking in ink. Have you ever heard this phrase before? It is a good phrase. If there's something which is of interest, please make sure you write it down, whether or not it's myself, Pam, one of the amazing speakers today, because if you write something down, you're 80% more likely to remember it, okay? But try and not get distracted by your technology. And just as a little icebreaker this morning, one of the things that we created at 8 Billion Ideas, which I'm the CEO of, is our future job kit cards, which you'll be able to take a QR code in a minute and get access to them, just to get the conversation moving and changing, because I believe we're living in a very exciting world of an opportunity. So quick game of what would you rather be? A space tourism operator or a cybersecurity specialist? Space tourism? A few more hands for that. Cybersecurity specialist? Couple of hands there in the middle. What about a work from home facilitator or an ethical hacker? Ethical hacker, going to take that one. And a virtual surgeon versus a climate change reversal specialist. There we go, the audience are getting it going there. Some really interesting cards there. We developed them as a business because we passionately believe at 8 Billion Ideas that we're living in a very exciting world of opportunity. Students aren't limited, in fact, not just students, all of us aren't limited to postcode, by postcode or zip code to working with organizations all around the world. However, one of the most important conversations around careers, skills, the future of a child's life doesn't just happen at home, does it? Sorry, it doesn't just happen at school, it also happens at home. So we designed these cards to make sure that between parent and child, whether it is around the dinner table, on the sofa, wherever it might be, that they can explore some of the future jobs come out, and also challenge some of our parents out there about how quickly the world is moving. So feel free to take that download and have a little look. I'm proudly the CEO of an organization called 8 Billion Ideas, and we're on a mission to give every student on the planet the skills and belief to go change the world. I've been very blessed to visit schools all around the world, and we work with students in schools all around the world every single day. And one thing that I've learned over the years is that every single child that I've ever met has an amazing imagination. Would you agree with me? Would you agree with me, ladies and gentlemen? Of course, good. Every child is brilliant, but every child is on a different journey, okay, with the amount of skills that they might have and indeed the belief. We concentrate in the critical curriculum space. I don't like the phrase extra curriculum anymore, but we very much concentrate in the critical curriculum space, which is helping to teach students about entrepreneurship. Schools produce more entrepreneurs than any other profession. 1 in 5 of our students in schools today will go on in the future and start a business, not necessarily when they're 18 or 21 or 25, but at some point in their working life. And whether or not a child wants to be an entrepreneur doesn't matter. But having that entrepreneurial mindset, that confidence to act on an idea is absolutely critical. We currently operate in the career space, which I want to state the case that I think it should be the passion space in the years ahead. But the reason we do that is because we are living in an exciting world of opportunity. It is difficult for schools to be at the cutting edge of this day in, day out when things are moving. Third is skills for the future, and I'll touch on that a little bit more this morning. Particularly 2 skills that we drive is around creativity and problem solving. You can pretty much guarantee in 2073 and 50 years' time that the world is still going to need problem solvers and still going to need creative people. And the last area is about performance and well-being, because we're seeing some massive challenges in that space globally around the world. It looks so different for us, and the reason why I'm just positioning this is to give a bit of context to why I can speak, but it looks so different from us from school to school, whether it's a virtual engagement, a hybrid engagement, but we're very blessed to work with students from 4 to 18. Now, I'm a big believer that when you have the opportunity to speak, it's your responsibility to try and create a memorable moment, something that sticks in the back of the mind of the audience. Has anybody read this book before? Good, if you've not read it, read this book. It is a great book by the Heath brothers. They talk about the power of the moment, okay? And that in education, that we often don't have to wait for those moments. We can make them happen more often than not. Really fascinating story just at the beginning of this book, where it talks about how Disney has built up its brand over many, many decades and many, many years. And it actually asks parents, when they take their children to Disney, to score out of 10 at any given point in their experience. Okay, and there's a thread and a pattern that they've learned at Disney. When you turn up at Disney, you're all excited. You're excited about taking your children into Disney. Most parents are rating that moment around 9 o'clock on that first morning, 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10. They've got through the doors of Disney. They're waiting in a hot queue. What do you think their score is at that particular point? 3, 2, 4, the children are getting a bit agitated, everybody's getting a bit frustrated, and then what happens in the middle of the day after a few rides? Minnie and Mickey Mouse come out. Okay, great photo, and normally at that particular point it's 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It dips in the afternoon when they go and spend a lot of money on lunch, and there are a few more hot cues, and then at the end of it when they get their photo when they're leaving from Disney, parents are rating it 9, if not 10 out of 10. However, if you look at their rating over a 4-day period, it's often around 4, if not 5 out of 10. It's not a high rating about their experience, but then if you ask the parents 8 weeks later to rate their experience of Disney, they're always giving it much higher than their actual rating at the time. And it's often because they can relate it back to a moment, okay? They're often remembering when Minnie Mouse came out, or the start of the day, at the end of the day, whatever it might be, and they give it an 8 out of 10 score 8 weeks down the line. So the reason why I tell that story is because when we listen to presentations, sometimes it can be challenging. What is the key thing that I'm going to take away from today? And the one thing I would like the audience today to hopefully take away from my short time on stage is that children can lean on their passions, right? Skills, and that is always changing. It's so difficult. But if a child can leave school at the age of 18 and leave education with a much clearer understanding about what they are passionate about, and you do not need to be passionate about one thing, you can be passionate about multiple things, then they can lean on that in the years ahead. Okay, I'm very passionate about sport, education, business, all these different things which began to be unlocked at school, okay? But a lot of that unlocking for me happened outside of school as well. So I'd like to see a more focus on passion going forward. Now, why do I have the right to speak to you? Okay, a few different hats that I wear. I am also a dad of 3. I have 3 boys at home, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-month-year-old. It is brilliantly busy at home, and I'm often terrifically tired. But becoming a parent and working in education, it gave me a new sense of responsibility and purpose to really look at what was happening in education and what my organisation, 8 Billion Ideas, would do so my children could benefit. So I have that parent hat on. The second hat on is a passionate educationist. I believe this is the best sector on the planet. Would you agree with me? Thank you very much in the front row. It is the best sector on the planet because every day we have the opportunity to create memorable moments, okay? Moments which really can challenge children to think. And lastly, I'm a passionate CEO, okay? So I am a business owner. I started a business, and the journey of becoming a business owner is you are a person with an idea. You then do something about that idea, and suddenly you become an entrepreneur. And then you start employing people, and suddenly you become a CEO. But from that side of the fence, okay, it's really interesting when you start to employ people, what you're looking for, that kind of can-do attitude, the passions that people can bring into your business. So I speak to you with these different hats on. And I guess the last thing as well, not the last thing, but you just see the world a little bit differently. Okay, when you're a dad, when you're an educationist, and when you're an employee. It's tough for schools to get this right. Okay, it is really tough. If we talk about career education and what schools have typically done around this space around the world, they are often running around trying to do their best. Schools are brilliantly busy places, but most career departments around the world have been underfunded. Okay, we might have one person responsible for career education. They've got limited time. Time is the biggest problem in education, isn't it? There is no time. We're trying to do so much in our schools, particularly in those departments, and we have limited resources. And what I mean by this is constant education in this space, with the world changing so much. Schools are brilliantly busy. Okay, you see a phrase there that I like. Not busy. If you ever ask anybody how they are, most people say that they're busy. Do they say it in a positive way or a negative way? Negative way. Okay. I like to say that I'm brilliantly busy. I am terrifically tired, but I am brilliantly busy, and schools are brilliantly busy, right? They've got so much responsibility, but equally schools have so much emotion going on in one building. We have the needs of our students, the needs of our teachers, and the needs of our parents as well. So that is why schools are crazy places, but brilliantly busy places as well. So much is happening in schools, but one of the things which has also happened outside of our schools over the last few years is a big thing called the pandemic. Okay, which came along, and it was relatively disruptive to all of our lives, and particularly the working economy. Okay, what we saw in that period of time, in no time at all, we saw industries destroyed, we saw industries redefined, but excitingly, we saw industries created. We also saw skills getting future ready, and the future of the economy being challenged for the first time in a long time. I think we were going on a successful path. Sustainability was being talked about, but every business model across the entire planet, forgive me, was challenged and was looked at. And therefore, we started to see new publications, okay, with particularly the World Economic Forum, who are always referred to in days like today and in speeches like this. But their skills list, which they constantly produce, does actually cause us a lot of problems in our schools around the world. They often publish their top 10 list. And then what happens is we try to do our best to try and help students of all ages get ready for these, to get ready and make sure that they've got these skills. And what typically happens is once a school have got themselves sorted, it changes, okay, again and again and again. And the reason why I've underlined the creativity and particularly problem solving is they're two which have been consistently in that top 10 for decades, okay? And I would bet in this conference, in 50 years' time, we're coming back and talking about the future of education in maybe 2100, but that we are going to be always talking about problem solving and creativity. So it's been a challenge, but we do need to make sure that it changes. And for me, one of the things, the subtle changes that I think I would do if I was in charge of education across the entire planet for a day. I often get carried away. If only I had that responsibility. One of the things, there'd be a long list, but one of the things that I would really consider doing is evolving career departments and calling them passion departments, okay? And I'll explain why. Children can't answer this simple question. In fact, adults can't answer this simple question. What are you passionate about? Everything on there. Good. All right? Most of the time when you ask somebody this question, and particularly students, and there's a few students in the room, I'm going to collar after this and ask them this particular question, they might look up to the sky or they might look down towards their feet. And they might mumble a few things to me. But I would like students to be able to leave school and be able to clearly answer this question. Because if you can clearly answer this question, when you've got to make changes and decisions on your career, it will make life a lot easier. We're seeing lots of different changes as well. Look, parents are not stupid, right? Parents know the world is changing. Parents also know what they went through. And 85% of parents out there would like to see life skills more in the agenda and happening in schools. One of our other challenges is that we do actually box children up too early. We do it in our schools, we do it at home. And what I mean by this is when a child mumbles a particular interest, such as I want to be an engineer or I want to be a doctor, we'll go, great, good. All right, Toby, you're 6, you've just mentioned you're going to be a doctor, you will be a doctor. And we keep reinforcing that, we keep talking about it. Toby carries on, he becomes a doctor, and he realizes he does not want to be a doctor. In the United Kingdom, there is a big problem, with the financial services organisations, where we have got a lot of 20-somethings in the United Kingdom which have become accountants. And the reason why is in the university space, the big 4 accountancy firms, PwC, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, they advertise and they support and sponsor everything, okay, pretty much everything. So a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds see these brands, they apply to join them, they start on a scheme of work and they realize when they're 24, 25, 26 that that wasn't the right thing to do. Now, I'm not having a go at accountants. The world needs brilliant accountants. The thing that I'm trying to mention here is that we are strongly influenced by what we see around us. But what I'm really concerned about is how we box up children far too young. So we've got to stop doing it. And what happens, and if we do, if we continue to box up children when they mumble a particular interest and we don't just get curious with them and explore it with them, we begin to see the cliff years, okay? Where a child is going into leaving education, they might or not go to university, and they hit somewhere in their mid-20s, maybe in their mid-30s, where it might be, and they go, how am I doing this? Why am I doing this? This is not even linked to what I want to do. And it goes back to the boxing that we do in the early years space, in the primary school space. It goes back to when they're making big decisions, such as what subjects that they want to study. More often than not, they're picking things that they think they should do or what they're being told to do. And ultimately, that's having a terrible impact on global satisfaction in the workplace. 80% of people currently working across this entire planet are grumpy. 80% of people are dissatisfied with their day job. Isn't that frightening? Okay, absolutely frightening. Imagine if we flipped it, okay? We had 80% of people absolutely delighted with what they do on a day-to-day basis. I'm pretty convinced we would have better schools, better businesses, our governments would be run slightly better all around the planet. But this goes back to this whole conversation around career education and what we're doing in schools. We have to also not ignore the fact that we are seeing the rise of self-employment as well. Okay, as I mentioned, 1 in 5 students are becoming entrepreneurs. It could be as high as 2 in 5 students, and nearly 40% by the end of the decade. We have to get out the mindset of a child could have one job when they leave school. Okay, they could have multiple jobs, as I'm sure people in this room do. I don't think success should be really, sorry, I do think success, do not agree. I think success should be really defined on a child understanding what their passions are so they can lean on them. This is really key. Anybody in this room who is 5, 10, 15, 25, 30 years, whatever years into your career, you'll know that when you have to make a decision, okay, you are looking at the organization that you might work for, but more often than not, you might also listen to something called gut instinct. Okay, do we know what gut instinct is? Good. Okay, it's what your heart and your head is telling you about. And often that's linked to your passions. So when you're leaning on big decisions, you'll go back to what your heart and your head is telling you about. So I'd like to see us empower young children to explore their passions a little bit more and answer some of the big questions. These are my boys, okay? This is a photo before I left home a couple of weeks ago. You can see Toby at the top. This is Harry, and this is Ben about to be dropped by his eldest brother. And they are 3 happy lads, okay, 3 happy boys. And I think the thing that my wife and I are probably most proud of is that they chuck themselves into things. They get as busy as they possibly can be. And look, we're not perfect, mum and dad. We're trying our best, as every mum and dad does on the planet. But one of the things that I really want to do as a dad and as an educationist, which is running an education company, is help my children and help other children out there be able to answer that particular question about what you're passionate about. So therefore, Toby, when he leaves school in 2034, okay, in 11 years' time, he will be 18. I hope that he will be able to answer that particular question. If you think about it, it comes back to the Simon Sinek theory. Okay, if you're unaware of Simon Sinek is, I believe it's one of the best TED Talks of all time. It's one of the simplest TED Talks of all time, where he talks about why businesses and why certain individuals are successful. It's because they know what makes them tick. Okay, it always comes back to why they do what they do and not what they do. The exciting thing is, though, if we think about how does a child actually unlock their passions a little bit more, it's about exposure, it's about experiences. And with the rise of EdTech in the last few years, it has finally moved away from being a muddy topic in education. I think if you walked into schools 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, there was just one perception of what EdTech was really about. But now things have changed, and they're changing quite dramatically, that children can access great speakers, they can learn from great facilitators all around the world every single day. And that's what 8 Billionideas does. We're very proud to work with schools all around the world, having that virtual but also that hybrid element where they get to meet brilliant people from 8 Billionideas, not just behind the screen or virtually. We were massively inspired by a gentleman that some of you might not know a couple of years ago called Joe Wicks. Give me a wave if you know who Joe Wicks is. Give me a wave if you've got no idea who Joe Wicks is. Okay, Joe Wicks is this incredibly inspirational I wouldn't say PE teacher, but fitness trainer in the United Kingdom. And when lockdown kicked in, for the first 30 days of lockdown, he did a PE lesson at 9 o'clock every single day. Millions and millions and millions of students tuned in for that experience. And yes, it would not necessarily replicate or swap an experience on the sports field with that direct PE teacher, but it was remarkable, actually, what Joe did in those 30 days for students across the United Kingdom and around the world. And I couldn't help but think, okay, if there's a brilliant speaker around the topic of entrepreneurship, STEM, or whatever it might be, do they physically now always have to be in that school, or could we use EdTech in a different kind of way going into the future? Could they be beamed in? Could they partner with schools in a different way? And that's where I believe EdTech has evolved and will evolve to continue to support schools in the future. I'd love to see students to be given the opportunity. I think, going back to Pam, I think it's really important that career education has to start from the moment a child walks into a school, not just in the last few years when they're thinking about their exams. We should be getting children from as young as 3, 4, 5, 6, so excited about the world they're about to grow up in and have that understanding of what they're passionate about. Maybe one day, students will also have grades, but they might sit in an interview and also have passion portfolios, invention portfolios that they can share with people that they want to go work for. My main takeaway today, I think I've kept to my 20 minutes, so I've been well behaved, and I am here for the rest of the day, is that if children can lean on their passions, it's going to be a big, big help for the rest of their lives. Education is the best sector in the world. Would you agree with me for a second time? Absolutely the best sector in the world. Why? Because we have the power to make some amazing moments every single day in all of our schools all around the world. If you're a student in the room, hopefully that's been helpful. Please, please, please make sure you go explore your passions. School is a brilliant space to do it. Try new sports, new hobbies, whatever it might be. If you're a parent in the room, continue to explore your own passions, but don't shut a passion down. If a child shares it with you, be curious with them, even if you have absolutely no idea what it might be. And to teachers in the room, okay, we have a huge responsibility to make sure we're flooding our students with as many experiences as we possibly can. So I certainly believe we can change the world. I certainly believe we've got a huge amount to be excited about in education in the future. I hope today was a little bit memorable. There are my contact details. I am dyslexic, so if you do email me or you do get in contact on LinkedIn, I will come back to you as soon as I possibly can. I do enjoy a voice note feature coming back to people, but I'll be very happy to answer any question that you might have. And just thank you very much for having me today. Thank you.
David Harkin, everyone, thank you very much. Next on stage, Dr. Ghanim, please. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Ghanim Al-Sulaiti, and I'm from Qatar Computing Research Institute. So for those who don't know what Qatar Computing Research Institute stands for, it is a QCRI, and it is one of the 3 main research institutes at the Qatar Foundation. So we have a research institute on environment and energy, a research institute on biomedicine, and the third one is where I am affiliated with. So today I'm going to briefly discuss the implication of AI in general on jobs, and I will be focusing more on the implication of ChatGPT because it is the trend and everyone nowadays are talking about the impact of ChatGPT on jobs. So AI has been infiltrating our lives in different ways. I'm pretty sure that the majority of us here at least uses one of the applications listed on the screen. And what the majority of people don't realize is that these applications are powered by AI. And the reason why they don't realize that, because most of the AI magic happens in the background. So for example, when you browse products on Amazon, it keeps, giving you recommendations on products that you might like. And the way they do it is that they keep tracking your browsing information and so on, and it tries to understand your behavior. And the AI then gives you some sort of recommendations of products that you might like. The same happens with, with YouTube recommending you content to consume, Twitter and TikTok and so on. However, things are recently changing as new AI solutions are being promoted to the general public, and people are having direct interaction with this AI solution. For example, Whisper is a speech detection solution that can transcribe into many different languages. DALL-E is another also AI solution that can take text prompts, something like, imagine an Arab person riding a camel on the moon, and then it creates like an original art, like a picture, like depicting the text that you described. Last but not least, we have ChatGPT, and for those who don't know what ChatGPT is, it's like a chatbot that enables you to have a conversation with a chatbot in a human-like fashion, and it's able to answer questions, solve problems, and even write programming codes. So as AI is becoming more visible to the people, many started to panic. It's like, and it's becoming to perform some of the duties that a human used to exclusively perform. People started to panic. What would be the impact of ChatGPT on jobs? What kind of jobs might be replaced by ChatGPT? Is it like white-collar jobs, blue-collar jobs, and so on? So when scholars and the practitioners in general try to understand the impact of AI in general or ChatGPT specifically on jobs, there are 2 main perspectives. The first one is looking at the impact of AI on jobs through the lens of job creation and job replacement. For example, in a report by the World Economic Forum, it has been estimated that around 85 million jobs will be replaced by AI by 2025. The same report indicated that there will be around 97 million jobs created by AI during the same period. Another AI expert expected that there would be around 20% of the current jobs will be impacted by ChatGPT. The other perspective on the impact of AI on job is looking at it through the perspective of AI augmentation. And what AI augmentation means is that looking at the machine as a co-worker. It's working with the human to increase the productivity and efficiency of their jobs. So in this presentation, I'll be mostly arguing that ChatGPT or AI will not be replacing jobs. But before going through that, I'll just briefly discuss a study that was conducted at QCRI and shows that how AI can augment jobs in Qatar. So the study was conducted by a couple of colleagues of mine 3 years ago, and it was focusing on the Qatari job market. And the main finding of that study was that white-collar jobs, or what we call like the cognitive jobs, are mostly impacted by AI more than blue-collar jobs. And this finding is quite surprising for many people because they would assume that AI will be more impacting blue-collar jobs or low-skill jobs, as was the case with the first and second industrial revolution. However, that's not the case with AI. And another important finding in the Qatari job market is that the majority of the jobs or like 50% of the jobs conducted by or performed by Qataris are susceptible to AI augmentation. And the reason behind that, obviously, is that Qataris mostly, like conduct jobs that are like white collar and cognitive rather than, blue collar jobs. So let's take an example of how AI can augment jobs. So for example, we have the job of an accountant, and the main task of the accountant is bookkeeping or log keeping, and look into the financials and the accountancy of the firm. So there are two ways, for example, ChatGPT can augment or support the job of the accountant. The first one is what we call knowledge retrieval. So the accountant can ask ChatGPT, for example, to provide a list of the auditing processes, or the kind of ratios or mathematical formulas that are used to examine the balance sheets of the firm. Another example of what ChatGPT can do and augment the job of accountants is what we call quantitative reasoning. So you can ask ChatGPT, for example, if I'm going to add some sort of liabilities or fixed assets to the assets that the company owns, what would be the impact on the overall balance sheet? And ChatGPT can, provide some sort of reports and do the mathematical calculations for the accountants. And by doing that, the accountant will be more able to, focus on to eliminate some of the repetitive tasks and focus on more the critical task or critical thinking required to perform his job. So as I said, at the QCRI, we are more proponents of AI augmenting jobs rather than replacing jobs. And there are 4 main reasons why I think AI will be augmenting jobs rather than replacing them. The first reason why I think that AI or ChatGPT specifically will not be replacing jobs is the fact that many of the current estimates are not accurate or sometimes exaggerating. So for example, in a study conducted by 2 Oxford scholars, they estimated that there is a 94% probability that the jobs of accountants will be computerized within the next 2 decades. This means, according to them, is that within the next 2 decades, the job of accountants will be replaced by machines or AI. However, if we fetch the data about the number of accountants in the US, we can see that the number of accountants have been growing since 2013. That's when the Oxford study was published, up until 2021. So this gives an indication that, like many of the estimates that you read on like the news and so on are just exaggerating or inaccurate. The second reason why I think AI or ChatGPT specifically will not be replacing jobs is the fact that our jobs are composed of many different tasks. So for example, I don't know if you can see through the screen, but this is the job description of an acute care nurse. And while AI or ChatGPT or whatsoever can conduct some of the tasks that are performed by acute care nurse, it cannot perform all the tasks. For example, the first task on the list relates to interpreting the results of a heart monitor or an X-ray machine. And AI actually, I mean, in the recent studies, it has been shown that AI can do that better than humans. However, the last three tasks, for example, something like drawing blood samples, prescribing medicine to the patients, and monitoring the reaction of the patient to that medicine, or even consulting with the family of the patient or the caregivers of the patient, these are things that AI cannot do. So this gives an indication that even if AI can do some of the tasks in your job, it cannot do all the tasks in your job. So it cannot fully replace your job. The third reason why I think also AI cannot replace jobs is the fact that there is a human element to our jobs. So we all know the job of an executive secretary. This job has been existing since movies, where in black and white they have been using pen and papers, using phones to schedule phones and events or invitations. And recently, in the recent years, there has been many smart applications such as AI assistant tools like Siri, Google Assistants, or the smart calendars, or even the smart email sorters and so on. And one would assume that the jobs of executive secretaries should have been replaced or diminished by this time. However, we still have secretaries nowadays doing their jobs using pen and pencils and occasionally using some of these applications to increase the productivity and efficiency of their jobs. And last but not least, the last thing that governments actually want is mass unemployment. And governments are likely to intervene to prevent AI and technology to replace jobs. And one of the suggested intervention as of how to prevent AI from replacing jobs is offered by Bernie Sanders and Bill Gates, in which they urge governments to tax robots. So robots that might likely to replace jobs. So companies actually will think twice before replacing the job of a human with a robot. So there are many positive impacts for AI and ChatGPT in general on our jobs. I list a few here, and the first is the automation of tasks and increasing the efficiency and the productivity of our jobs. And by increasing the efficiency and the productivity, I mean that AI is able to perform some of the repetitive tasks that we do and enable us to focus more on creativity and doing more of the critical thinking side of our tasks. Now, there are two recent studies that were published by MIT and GitHub. The first was on writers, and the second one was on programmers. And it has been found that, ChatGPT specifically was able to increase the productivity of writers and programmers by at least 30%. The second positive impact of ChatGPT on our jobs is enabling creativity and idea generation. So, for example, I'll just take myself as an example. Just to prepare some of my recent presentations, I just go to ChatGPT and I ask it to write an outline of a presentation. And it would give you, it's like a proper outline of, for example, what would be the impact of AI on jobs. And then instead of you starting from scratch, it can give you some sort of ideas and generate ideas for you so that you can develop further on them. The third positive impact is increasing the learning potential for employees. So now employees have direct access to information. They can ask questions and get instant responses. So that lowers the learning curves for the majority of employees. The fourth positive impact is enhancing the communication skills for employees. So many people now actually use ChatGPT to respond to emails. So for example, if someone gets an email from a CEO or a manager, then asking for a raise, for example, ChatGPT can write the template for you, and then you can, edit it and send it later on. And the same happens with communicating with different entities or writing, acceptance letter for schools and so on. And last but not least, we have the cost optimization. So many of the tasks that were previously performed in the organizations were outsourced for other people. But now ChatGPT, for example, as an AI solution, can perform many of the tasks that companies were spending money to bring other experts from outside the firm to perform. Now, even though there are many positive impacts of ChatGPT or AI, there are three main negative impacts on the workforce. The first one relates to inequality, and by inequality I mean increasing the gap difference between the rich and the poor. So imagine there is a developer in Africa who doesn't have access to strong computing power and doesn't have access to ChatGPT versus a developer in the US or in Europe who has access to these technological tools. So the developer in Africa, sorry, the developer in the US or the developer in Europe will outperform the developer in Africa, not because of the individual skills, but because he has access to resources. So competency will no longer be based on individual skills, but it will be based on having access to these resources and capabilities. The second negative impact of ChatGPT or AI on the workforce is what we call model and owner bias. So for those who don't have any idea about what model bias means, so usually these AI systems are trained on data, so real data. And usually what happens, this kind of data have some sort of biases. So whenever then you use the AI system, the model would become biased because the data that the model was trained on was biased. However, with ChatGPT, I started to notice another form of bias, which is owner or what we call developer bias. So this is an example that has been widely circulated on Twitter, in which like users asked ChatGPT to write a positive poem about the traits of Donald Trump. ChatGPT refused to do that, but when it was asked to do the same with Joe Biden, it did. And the reason behind that, not because the model itself, the AI system was biased, but because the developers themselves, to some extent, are biased because they marked, there is a filtering mechanism just before the AI system execute the command. They marked Donald Trump as a controversial person. So before your command goes to the AI system, there is a filtering mechanism that just detects like Donald Trump, and then it will say, I'm sorry, I cannot write anything about Donald Trump. And the same happens, with Elon Musk and other controversial persons on Twitter. And last but not least, again, another drawback or negative impact of ChatGPT or AI in general on the workforce is inaccuracy and IP infringement. So basically, it has been found that in many occasions, ChatGPT did not cite the right information. And even when it was asked to cite the information, it created fake citations. So for example, here it was, ChatGPT was asked to cite the most cited economic paper of all time. And it created a paper that does not exist, called like A Theory of Economic History by Douglas North and Robert Thomas. So none exist, and imagine that if you are using such kind of AI tools to conduct your job, for example, to produce a report, and it is full of bias or full of inaccurate information or full of IP infringement. So as I've demonstrated through my talk, there are like positive impacts of AI. AI is going to augment some of the jobs. However, there is like one key message that I'd like you to take away from my talk is that AI itself will not be replacing your job. A person using AI will. Thank you very much.
So, ChatGPT, please create an algorithm and invite the 6 most prominent speakers in education and future education to an event entitled 2040. And here we are. Thank you so much, Dr. Ghanim. We're now going to pause for a short break. A slight change to plans. After we come back from the break in 20 minutes, there'll be a short time for Q&As, and we'll make it a bit more personal. We'll share the mic. And we'll do it in-house rather than write the questions down on the iPad. Okay? If you'd like to join us outside for tea, coffee, some light refreshments, please do so. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to start in 2 minutes. Should you need a refreshment break, coffee or tea, throughout the next few presentations, feel free to help yourself and then come straight back in. We're going to start with a video from Dr. Phill. I just wanted to ask, does anyone have any questions they want to ask our guests before we move forward? If you think of any through the next few presentations, there will be an opportunity towards the end to ask those questions. So Dr. Phill has joined us through video. He's created a video for us. When I was reading about Dr. Phill, have you ever wondered what it's like to design a spacesuit? Is my leading question for you.
Good day all. I hope you're enjoying the ACS 2040 Future Skills Forum. I'm Dr. Phill Carvel and I'm the head of clusters here in the northwest of England for the Science and Technology Facilities Council, part of UK Research and Innovation. what is my role? Well, my role is all about connectivity. How do we bring different organizations and people together and enhance knowledge sharing, the awareness of opportunities and capabilities they can access, and lay the foundations for new collaborations which can drive research, innovation in a particular sector or between sectors, and growth of organizations. So when I said sector, what do I mean by that? So we can categorize a sector by looking at health and life sciences as a sector, so developments in things such as vaccines and digital technologies for health. Or take another example, the space sector, where organizations are developing tools and equipment for space, as well as thinking about how we use the space environment to create new insights here on Earth. For instance, in terms of enhancing awareness of how agriculture and crops are grown by using satellite technology. That's what I mean by sector. How did I get into this? Well, I'm a scientist by background. I did my initial training in how the human body changed in health and disease, and then looked at how the body changed in extreme environments. Firstly, looking at things such as diving and deserts and sports, then looking at the space environment. So I did my doctorate training at King's College London with the European Space Agency, looking at how the human body changed in space and mechanisms we could use to improve health and well-being in space. Now that is one thing I am particularly passionate about, where you have insights in one sector, such as space, and another, such as health, and look at that intersection between them. How did that come about? Well, I think I have a lot to thank my parents for. So my mother was an intensive care nurse, and my father really ignited my passion for space. So he was a technician and between them, I think I had a very rich upbringing in terms of insights into health and the space sector. I've got a number of questions I'd like to go through now. So one of them is have I had any specific experiences or events that led me to find a field that I'm passionate about? Well, I mentioned that point about my parents and how they've supported me, but also I think things which have really ignited my passion is hearing the stories of others as well. That has come about through going to events, such as the one you're at now, but also to conferences, watching certain documentaries that have really helped to expand my awareness of that sector and how I can get involved in it. I think that is also an important thing. How can I get involved in a sector? If I take an example such as space, the initial impression might be that you need to be an astronaut to work in the space sector, and that is completely not true. It is a huge sector of opportunities for those working in finance, for those setting up new companies, those who are looking to support skills and talent training. So for those who are looking to be researchers, engineers, scientists, etc. It's a very rich pool of expertise which supports the space sector to be what it is. I think that is something I really learned from going to events, and from hearing different stories I could see myself being passionate about a particular role. And for me that was science, and where we bring science together with others to really drive innovation. Another question is, are there any specific skills or characteristics that I believe have been critical to my success? One, the support from my tutors and teachers at school and at university. And I think what really helped in that environment is the opportunity to ask questions to them and to hear their support. That has been a critical change for me. Another skill which I think is also critical is communication. So improving my own networking skills. I was very shy when I was younger, but what I did was try to expose myself to more events and opportunities to speak to people so I could enhance that skill. And that very much created a step change for me. And finally, is there any one piece of advice I would give to people and their parents to assist them in finding their passion? Talking to people. Going to events like this and just seeing what piques your interest. It may be one thing, it may be multiple things, but once you've got a feeling for what interests you, try to ask people who are involved in that sector what it feels like. going, or maybe look at opportunities to attend events where you can meet more about that industry, and that can enhance your ability and determination if that is something that you want to do. Then the key thing following your passion is going, listen to those who are involved, try to learn as much as you can. Going, it is trial and error. You won't always have the 100% success, and that's completely okay. The key thing is to try, see where you can do things differently, improve, and ask questions as you go along. That is all about the learning and rich environmental journey we are on. I hope you enjoy the rest of this forum going, and I can't wait to hear about the developments happening at it.
Like David, another speaker talking about following a passion. At this stage, I'd like to invite Victoria Humphries up to stage, who will introduce herself.
Actually, no. I'm not sure if I've got the good slot being last or the bad slot, because everyone's heard so much amazing information so far. They're going to be like, well, what's she going to say that's different? I want you to imagine that you are standing on a giant ice floe in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. All around you, there is ice and nothing else. You're 2 miles above the ocean bed, and there are only 3 people in the whole world further north than you. And it would take 18 hours for a plane to come and rescue you. Your goal is to walk to the North Pole. You just need to ski for 8 to 10 hours a day, heading north and hoping that the minus 40 degrees temperature doesn't lead to frostbite or hypothermia. Suddenly, there is a large bang, a noise like a pistol shot. And within seconds, the ice in front of you has cracked and has opened up to create a massive river of water that is getting larger and larger by the second. You turn round, hoping to retrace your footsteps, and the ice behind you has risen 30, 40 foot up into the air to create a ginormous pressure ridge. What do you do? What's your reaction? And how do you cope? That mindset is what the selection team were looking for when we applied to be a member of the first all-female expedition to the North Pole. And you might be wondering, well, how does this relate to helping your children, our young people, your students? How does it relate to helping them navigate the real world? Quite simply, the world is not linear. Any plan that we have, it could be as a 4-year-old, I want to be a doctor. Any plan that we have, the chance of that plan actually panning out exactly as planned is highly unlikely. So the skills we need in order to succeed in life and to survive in the Arctic is actually all in the mind. And there is a phrase in the Arctic that it is 90% mental and 10% physical. So what the selection team were looking for this expedition, which was a relay made up of 5 teams, each of 4 women, and we were going to become the first women in the world to walk to the North Pole. They were looking for people who had the right mindset, people who grabbed every opportunity. So I was brought up always to believe, well, give it a go. If I said to my parents, shall I climb the tree? They'll be like, well, why not? And I would be, well, I might fall out. So what? You might break your arm, okay, a bit inconvenient, but ultimately try everything. You don't know what's going to happen unless you try it. Grab an opportunity. I saw an advert, women wanted to walk to the North Pole, no experience needed. I was never in a sports team at school. I'm outdoorsy, I'm not sporty. I'd never dreamt of going to the Arctic. Who does? I mean, I bet if I ask for a show of hands, does anyone here dream of going to the Arctic or to the North Pole? Okay, I've got one person on my next expedition. Brilliant. ACS sponsor it, maybe, But it's not something you necessarily dream about. But I took an opportunity. Now, the reason my mindset is so important in the Arctic is because the ice is constantly moving. There are no maps in the Arctic because of this ice movement. You cannot plan. You cannot have, apart from the North Pole, you can have no game plan ever. Each night, we would put our tent door facing south. Every morning, our tent door would be facing a different direction. The ice cracks open in front of you or creates these pressure ridges the whole time. You can't take a bearing on, let's say, the fire exit. In normal world, you can take a bearing on it and you can walk towards it. Nothing in the Arctic is constant. So you've got to be able to have a mindset where you can cope with constant ambiguity, constant change. And that's something that your parents, or us as parents, can give our children. If we encourage them to cope with failure, to cope with things changing, to try something new, you will then have that mindset when something goes wrong, you can survive it. We had to learn, as well as the mindset, you did have to have technical skills. So we had to learn how to survive in the Arctic. Your tent is really heavy. Anyone who's been camping knows that to carry a tent is heavy. But weight is of the essence in the Arctic. If you have too much weight, you slow down, you can get hypothermia, or you won't get to the North Pole. So we didn't take a ground sheet. We put our sleeping bags straight on the ice. Our toothbrushes, we broke the handle off our toothbrushes because you don't need the handle. The weight is that important. Your toothpaste, we squeezed all the unnecessary toothpaste out of the tube because weight is vital. You have no spare clothes, no spare equipment, no luxuries. You want your sledge to be as light as possible. You had to learn about resilience. You had to learn that the ice will move the whole time in front of you. When you come to this picture here, this ice on the left, you stand there and you think, shall I go up and over? But if I take my skis off and clamber over the ice, it might take me half an hour because the sledge is heavy. I can't drop the sledge because the fiberglass will break. By the time I fumbled with my gloves to take my gloves off, take my skis off, get over, your hands are freezing cold. You've wasted half an hour, or you've spent half an hour, and then suddenly the gunshot, the ice opens in front of you. How do you feel in that moment? Do you think, oh, if you're the one leading that day, I'm useless. The rest of my team are going to think I'm a failure. I made the wrong decision. We should have gone the other way. The point is, you made the best decision on the evidence available at that specific time. When you got to that spot, the ice looked stable. So you invested in climbing over. But when you got to the other end, things out of your influence had changed. Equally, if you're a member of the team, you are a follower. What do you think about your team, your leader? So for the students among you, if you're in a sports team and your team captain makes a wrong decision, what do you think? If you here work in a team and your boss has been getting you to work towards a strategy for something or other for months and months and months, and then out of the blue says to you, actually, we've got to go a different direction. How do you cope? What's your immediate reaction? Now, that immediate reaction is valid. It's okay to say, oh, that's not fair. Oh, I'm useless, they're useless. Why didn't we? How didn't we? Those are human reactions. It's important to acknowledge them. It's not about being strong and fighting through. Allow yourself a 5-minute moan. That's what we were taught, a 5-minute moan. So for 5 minutes, you can think the world's having a go at you. You can think it's unfair. You can blame someone else. All those things in your mind, 5 minutes. But then you must pick yourself up and keep moving. That is the critical thing in life. Keep stepping, one step, one step, one step. You don't always know where you're going or exactly what's going to happen, but if you take one step, you will get there. We had other situations. This picture is my favourite. It's the perfect Arctic world. There's a bit of ice, a few lumps and bumps to make it interesting. Sun shining, you can easily navigate using the shadows. But for 3 days, we walked north. And we had the most amazing conditions. So we were covering 10 miles a day, which is big distance in the Arctic. Normally it's only 5 or 6 miles a day. At the end of the 3rd day, we radioed into base camp to tell them, we're amazing, we're gods. We are flying here. We've done 30 miles in 3 days. We are the best. And we were completely buzzing and on a high. And base camp, they said to us, something is not quite right. Can you press your emergency beacon just so we can see exactly what your location is? And we did that. And they radioed back. And they said, I'm really sorry, but you have drifted 30 miles south. So we were heading north, trying to get to the North Pole before the time, as time runs out when the ice melts too much for planes to land. So we were in a race against time, and we were going backwards. Again, how do you feel? What do you do? How do you cope? We did have a bit more than a 5-minute moan that night. It was probably half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and there were a few tears. But the point is, we had no choice up there. It's actually quite easy up in the Arctic because you have no choice. You've got no get out of jail card. We had to keep going. But I have to tell you, it was really hard. And we felt like complete and utter failures. But we weren't. We were doing everything right. It was just the way that the ice moves. At night time, you put up the tent. And you put it up every night. But you have to find a place where the ice is stable. The ice is strong. Because quite often, the ice will split open. And you'll hear this gunshot again. And the ice in your tent can split underneath you. And if you're not careful, your tent separates and separates. So it is really important that you learn about what type of ice to put your tent on at night. We also had the most disgusting food in the world. The food nowadays is a lot better up in the Arctic because technology's improved. And now you can get amazing home-cooked food, you freeze dry it, you add vitamins, supplements, calories, and everything's amazing. When we were up there, technology hadn't moved that far forward. And we had to eat 6,500 calories a day, which sounds heavenly. But actually, you've got to carry that weight with you. And so each one of us had to carry, or had to eat every day, a packet of butter. Now, I don't know how the butter comes now exactly. In the UK, it tends to come in packets of 250 grams. A packet of butter per person per day. Now, you can eat that on toast or other bits of food when you're at home, and you'd be still hard pushed to eat a packet of butter. But how do you eat that when it's just raw? We literally swallowed it. You just lump after lump after lump. Needless to say, I don't really eat butter. A bit like the milk story, and I don't drink milk either for the same reasons. A bit like the milk story, I cannot even look at butter now without thinking of the Arctic. But life wasn't always nice and sunny. We had days when the conditions were shocking. And the Arctic, like life, the Arctic is not a safe, sterile environment. All of us in life will be making decisions sometimes. Sometimes those decisions will be more risky than others. I am not condoning dangerous risk, definitely not. What I am saying in this example is sometimes in life we have to take a calculated risk. Again, based on the evidence available, based on where we want to go, you make a decision. We got to this bit of ice. This is my mother in the foreground. And you can see the ice is not solid and stable. There's bits of water in the back. That dark bit in the back right is open water. There's bits of slushy stuff around the front. There was no other route to go. Behind us was open water. To the left and right was open water. We had to go this direction. I took this photograph by pure coincidence. 2 seconds later, my mother disappeared from view. She just fell through the ice. The Arctic Ocean opened up underneath her. Through no fault of anyone's, she just disappeared. With her skis, sledges, boots, everything attached. She just fell into the Arctic. I leant on my sledge to try and get her. I fell in too. So you have both of us swimming in the Arctic Ocean. We were in the water for almost 10 minutes, desperately trying to detach our sledge, kick off our skis and our boots, desperately trying to get to, well, what we call dry land, but is just ice. And it was, I don't remember anything about that, if I'm really honest. It was complete survival mode. But we eventually got to these 2 ice floes. This was 10 minutes. We'd been swimming, and we'd managed to eventually scramble onto these ice floes. But so we were safe, but we certainly weren't on dry land, and we couldn't get to dry land because the ice was moving. It's like a river with these ice flows just move with the current because you're on the sea. And we're not entirely sure, no one can remember how we actually got to dry land. We think we half swam, half scrambled. But we got to dry land. We couldn't radio for help. We were 18 hours from base camp, and that was if a plane had been able to get up to us, and no plane could have landed. We had to survive on our own. We had to make decisions there and then. We couldn't have a team meeting to decide, so what do you think we should do in this situation? And everyone write a report and present it. You had to make a decision there and then. And so we just kept walking north. We walked one side of this river of open water, and the teammates on the other side walked the other. My mother had lost her skis, so she was walking with just a stuff sack, like a plastic bag over her feet. My sledge was lost. We'd lost loads of equipment. We just left it all there, and we're trying to find somewhere to survive, somewhere to cross. And we eventually, after 3 or 4 hours, got to this patch of ice where Mum was saying to me, the ice is moving, the ice is moving. And I was like, yeah, you know, you're losing your marbles, definitely not. And in front of our eyes, these 2 banks of ice came together. We crossed over, and I'm making it sound very simple. Obviously, it took a bit longer than the words coming out of my mouth. We crossed over. About half an hour later, we managed to meet up with the other team. We took them back to show them where this amazing thing had happened, and the water had opened up again. Now, I have a faith, so I believe it was a miracle of some kind. But the point is, something happened, and we are incredibly lucky to be here. I think if it hadn't been for that, I probably would not have been here talking to you today. But even at that point, we had no choice but to carry on. You know, life was difficult. We'd lost loads of our equipment. One of our guides went back to the scene of the battle, as we called it, and managed to rescue, pickaxing out almost all our equipment. We lost 2 ski poles. We never did rescue them. But we couldn't stop. That was where this mindset comes in. Life will be difficult. I was at my school, I was head girl. I failed all my A-levels. I'm sorry, teachers and students and parents. I failed all my A-levels. I was a disaster, but I didn't blame anybody. It was something that happened. I spent 24 hours reflecting on it, and then I moved forward. During COVID, I was running a business, so I clearly did okay despite failing A-levels. I was MD of a business. The company who owned it decided to sell it. In the middle of COVID, I had to make all my staff redundant, and then I had to make myself redundant. You know, I beat myself up for weeks and weeks with guilt, but it was something out of my control. So these things will happen. Sometimes you've had a part to play. My A-levels was definitely partly me. Sometimes you've had no part to play. But the point is, you've got to keep moving. One step, one step, one step. And you will get there. You know, ice conditions were awful. We spent 2 weeks trying to find somewhere for a plane to land. It got colder and colder. It's about -50, -60 degrees. And eventually, we got to a point where the plane could come and get us. And he came, he took one look, and he said, there's no way on earth I'm going to land there. There's too many pressure ridges. It's not safe to land, etc. We begged him because at that point, you are still in the scary situation. And if someone says to you, do you want to get out of jail card? Do you want to go home? Yes, please. Life's difficult. I don't want to be doing this. I want to be sitting at home in my comfort zone. But 2 hours later, we were at the aeroplane. Did I want to go home then? Of course not. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Actually, well, the water wasn't that cold. Oh, we could do the whole thing. And when you are in the middle of something really difficult, your sense of perspective goes, and it's easy to think, just get me out of here. But actually, when you pop out the other end, suddenly life isn't so difficult. And so I suppose what I would say to people, the final team, we did get to the North Pole. And, oh God, I suppose my alarm's going to go off in 10 seconds. There we go. Look at that for good timing, 20 minutes to the dot. We did get to the North Pole, the final team, but actually getting to the North Pole and being in the Guinness Book of Records and being voted Women of the Year, those kind of things, those are amazing. But do you know the bit that I've actually really learned from this is those lessons of life? It's about grabbing opportunities. Why not? What is the worst that can happen? If you are passionate about something, that's a word that's been used multiple times today. When things are difficult, if you have a passion and you love something, you are more likely to take those little steps and keep on moving. Don't aim for the North Pole. Don't aim for Everest as your day-to-day challenge. That's your goal. Break it down into bite-sized chunks. One step, one step, one step. If you wake up and say, tomorrow morning I'm going to go to the North Pole, you don't stand a chance. Make it achievable. Break it up. And just as adults, as young people, encourage everyone. It could be your colleague, it could be your boss, it could be your student, it could be anyone. When anyone says to you, oh, I can't do this, well, why not? Why can't you do it? Give it a go. And remember, resilience isn't about being strong. Resilience is about keeping going, about asking for help, being vulnerable, and just sharing. And the more passion, the more support network, the more you'll achieve. And so to the young people here in the room, I'd say, be bold, be brave, and this is the passion bit, be you, definitely. And you could go to the North Pole or Kilimanjaro or try anything. Thank you very much indeed. Good luck. That's the end.
We asked a question at the start of today's session. How do you teach courage? How do we teach courage to our children? And that was definitely a story of, I wrote 3 words, courage, inspiration and resilience. So thank you very much for sharing. And we're now going to move to a video by a woman called Kerry Lebbern. Kerry works in human resources, and this is her story to share.
Hello there, my name is Kerry Lebbern and I'm a global leader in IBM's Human Resources organisation. Now, I've had a fairly long career in IBM, probably something over 25 years, so I've got lots of experience. However, my current role is very interesting. So I work in a part of human resources called Employee Concerns. And I lead a small team of HR professionals who advise employees globally on how they can address their concerns themselves. So we're coaching employees to resolve their concerns. I also do some investigations from time to time. And in addition to that, I am something called an offering manager. So I look after our technology that supports our process. And I have a number of other projects on the go as well. They like to keep us busy. So let's just talk a little bit about my career. It's been, as I said, fairly long and varied. And I would say it's not been a straight line from the beginning to where I am today. But Along the way, there have been lots of different experiences. So as I said, probably around about 8 to 10 roles in my career. The key thing for me is, does the new role that you're going to do, bring you an opportunity for further development? It doesn't necessarily have to be a promotion, but it could be a sideways move to allow you to gain more skills so that you can then progress to the next role. So I always think about new roles in those terms. If I look back at my career, there have been some key moments of impact. If I think back as early as school, we really didn't have much in the way of careers advice in those days. And it was only when I got to university, I was doing an arts degree, and I was kind of floundering around not knowing what I was going to do, that I was lucky enough to meet the careers advice director at the university, who sort of took me under his wing and said, why don't you think about taking a year out in industry? I didn't know you could do that on an arts degree, but at this particular university you could. So I thought, that's a good idea. It will give me a chance to reset and gain some new skills and then come back and do my last year. So that's what I did. And guess where I ended up? Absolutely. At IBM in HR. So I've ended up now where I started, although, as I said, I've had lots of experiences along the way. So I did a year's internship. I'm going to reference here, as part of my career, key people. And the key people have been managers or leaders, could be stakeholders, or mentors. And I've had brilliant leaders and mentors along the way who've helped me progress, who've opened doors, who've made me think about things that I wouldn't have necessarily considered before, but also who've just acted in a purely advisory and guiding capacity. Those people have been invaluable to me in my career. And I now mentor employees myself because I think it's important to give back some of the rich advice that I got when I was going up through my career. So always have a mentor will be one of my pieces of advice. And they can change, by the way, depending on the situation you're in. Now, if I think about critical skills, the skills that have enabled me to be successful, I would say number one is adaptability. Because if you don't know much about IBM, one thing that I should tell you is that we are constantly transforming our strategy to remain essential to our clients. And so along the way, I've had to adapt, I've had to get on board with that strategy, and I've had to sort of reshape my thinking sometimes in my own career. So adaptability is number one. Number two, I would say being open-minded, being open and to new experiences, and also remaining curious. And then lastly, passion, because without passion and drive, I certainly wouldn't be where I am today. Oh, and talking of passion, you've probably seen that I also have a second career as a professional singer. And I could definitely talk for more than 5 minutes on this subject. But I just wanted to highlight that because as well as having a very busy day job, I do make time to explore my musical creativity. That is so important to me because it gives me that nice balance between my day job and my other life, my outside life. So let me just finish here with a little piece of advice. First of all, I would say be open to new experiences. Try not to close your mind to them. And then if you do embark on a new experience and it doesn't work out the way you thought it was going to, hang on in there and formulate a strategy for how you're going to change it. And remember, there are always people available to help. So bring them along with you and try and find a way to make your next move, whatever that might be. So I hope this has been interesting and I wish you all the very best of luck. Thank you.
Just as they're getting comfortable there, when Victoria walked off the stage, I did ask her, who was the person taking the picture whilst you were in the water? That was one of the questions I had.
No, actually, the girl taking the photograph, she was taking photographs anyway at that point, like I had been taking a photograph of Mum. And she carried on, not because she was being nasty, but we were also taught you mustn't go and save someone. It's better to have one person die than 2 people. So the question I'm then always asked is, well, if it was, you know, well, Robert, would you go and would I have saved him? Well, I'd like to think I would. I can't guarantee it, but, you know. But it's human instinct. I don't think I saved or went to save because she was mum. I went to save because it was a person. But yeah, people always do ask about the photograph.
Good story, good story. So, your chance to ask questions. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. We have people with mics.
Yeah, it's for you as well. After you went into the water for 10 minutes, weren't you guys like your clothes were completely waterproof? So nothing went in, you dried up?
No, we didn't.
No hypothermia?
No, we had no spare clothes. So when we went in the water, yeah, we were absolutely soaked from top to bottom. We had no spare clothes. You don't take spare clothes with you because of the weight. You take spare gloves, spare hats, spare socks, but just the one red suit. And so when we eventually got to the tent, about 10 hours later, we stripped off our red suit and we lay them outside to semi-freeze dry. And then you knock the ice off in the morning, but it never did dry out. And so for the next 2 weeks, we were walking in a red suit that every day got kind of stickier and stickier as the overnight ice melted each day. And our boots were completely sodden. And so they were very heavy because they got ice, that the wet would get icy each night. So they were very, very heavy to walk in. Yeah, so our suits never did dry out properly, but we didn't get any hypothermia, amazingly. We were, yeah, very lucky.
How long did you train for before you went on that excursion?
The training, we had 6 months training in the UK. At that point, it was about physical strength. It wasn't about speed, it was about physical strength, but they did more focused on the mental. So they made every training weekend, it was about making life difficult for us. So they would put rocks in our rucksacks if we were walking too fast, or they would tell us there was food around the corner, but they would hide it. Again, it's all preparing us for how do you cope.
Hi, good afternoon. I think a lot of you heard my voice at some point during this afternoon. I wrote this earlier, actually, when Robert was presenting. I think we had some of my question answered in bits and bobs by others, but I still want you to take this one. Where do you think we are with our children at this present time in the skills they need to grow and thrive in the world? And are schools really adapting their curriculum and training their teachers like they should be?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and there's not going to be an easy answer because it's such a good question, of course, which that's one of the marks of a good question. There aren't any easy answers. I think that schools are doing some really interesting and important things in making visible and adding language to and attending to some of the things which are always a little bit true about school, but we didn't count as being about school. So school is about grades and the knowledge that you could transfer from the teacher's head into the student's head. We're very concerned these days at looking about education in the round. And so I think teachers are moving away from the idea that I'm a teacher of science, kind of back to the idea that I'm a teacher for children. And so when you're teaching children about science, you're teaching them also how to be a scientist, as opposed to learning facts about science. So all of those things are really difficult because they change the curriculum, the kinds of things you decide to study, and more importantly, they change teachers' behavior about the way it is you need to teach and what's important and that you value. The second thing that schools are doing is to try to find ways, I talked about it in terms of how do we assess how well students can steer. So if you're assessing not what can you remember, but how can you apply knowledge? Things like the IB Middle Years program and e-assessment is a good example of that, I think, in terms of, I've always said that I hope there will always be tests, just they need to be the right tests, because it's important to test yourself and see if you can do. But if the test is asking you to figure out how well you can transfer what you know to something you haven't seen before, by definition, the test has to be a circumstance you haven't encountered. So if it's the right test, you can measure the right thing. And I think slowly but surely, schools are getting better at measuring the right thing. The third part of that is, though, that we have a very difficult time in measuring what matters, because the stuff that matters is notoriously difficult to measure. So scholars in cognitive neuroscience have been looking at how do you quantify and decide whether somebody actually has agility and perseverance and courage and grit and all those things. And every time we try to define that and to measure it, it sort of scoots away from us. Or what always happens is it's called the backwash of assessment. People begin to game the system so that by measuring a thing, you actually change it. So what's difficult about these constructs that are sometimes they were called soft skills, I prefer to call them human skills, I think, is that they can only be measured in real life. And so we can attend to that, but to some extent, we're never going to be able to give somebody a grade on how human are you. But schools need to be able to understand that all the things that we thought maybe didn't matter, mattered a lot. My last point of this would be to say that school is really important because it's not just the grades on the report card, but the entire educational experience. So what do you learn after school in the co-curricular program, on the sports field, all those things which have always been a little bit true, are not second-class citizens now. And we say that all of those things are important. And if we can, I suspect that we will have to tell stories about them rather than put them into a report card that has A, B, C, D, 5, 6, 7, because what makes us really human is our ability to tell stories about who we are and going to David's point, why it's important. So I think it's getting better, but it's really hard.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And if I had $5 for every time parents ask me that question, and in other countries it's the same, it's the 11 plus, the 13 plus in the UK. Across the world, there are different tests. Robert's right, it is changing more rapidly, because I think now what we're working to is what I would call a AAA, which is the acquisition of knowledge, the application of it, and then the aspiration. But underneath all of that, that's the cool stuff. Underneath it, and I always look at it, the assessments, it will take a while for it to change completely because somebody somewhere needs to have a benchmark. But what I can say to you is this, it's a little bit like having a driving license. When you learn to drive, there are certain specific skills you have to do, and then somebody tests you against them. Although we'll have driverless cars soon and that will be defunct. It's necessary in the same way that a surgeon, whoever, has to have the basic information, because if you have someone driving a car, they've got to have had those skills. Then they can drive any cool car in the world. There's your application and your aspiration. The same with the surgeon. He or she has got to have the basic skills, and then their quality assured. So that's there. I think what's happening, which is really good, is the realization that that's such a small part of what is happening out there in the world. And I can tell you honestly, at my age, and I've got to the age where I actually start talking about how old I am, which is terrible, isn't it, really? For the past 15, 20 years, no one has asked me what grades I got at anything. It is by your deeds shall we know you. So it's more and more, and if you look at the job descriptions, the role descriptors that are out there, they're asking for things like a first or second degree. Beyond that, and I'm not saying those assessments don't matter, it does inform teachers as to where the child could go next. However, the very best teachers, which I believe we have at ACS, or I wouldn't be on the board, or I'd be asking very big board questions, I believe we have those people who say, this is a part of it, it is not addressing the whole of you. So it's a necessary issue at the moment. The world is changing.
And parents will help to change it, because I call it the academic industrial complex will only change when parents say, I know that my child is more than this, and this is not the most important thing to me. I just got an email as we were sitting here, the results of UK applications are often coming in, the offers that kids get. And we have quite a large career-related program at ACS Hillingdon with the first large class coming through. All of those students have multiple offers for university with the career-related program, which is an alternate pathway which doesn't really care much about your SAT kind of scores, because you're demonstrating your career readiness in some very applied ways. And as parents begin to see that those are opportunities and that the world is not simply defined by the selectedness of the university my child was admitted to, then we can begin to have different conversations.
And I'll invite anyone else from the panel. Does anyone else want to expand on that answer?
If I could just chip in, I think what we need is I like being brilliantly busy and the brilliant balance, because as Pam said, I don't mean it's a bad thing, that feeling of working towards that examination, going into the exam room, it's just getting the balance, right? So you've got to have that baseline knowledge. You want to start a business, there's so much you pull on in every subject that you ever learn at school, but equally we've got to find ways for students when they're at school to have more times to create those businesses, to start something in Phill, to try something new when they're at school. So I think it's about the balance, but I do think it is a very exciting time to be in education right now. With the pandemic, there's been probably more scrutiny on the education system than ever before. Every parent across the planet had a viewpoint about homeschool learning, about whether it was good or whether it was not. And sometimes that scrutiny does put positive pressure on a sector. And the sector is evolving. I don't believe it needs a revolution at all. It needs an evolution, is what education needs, an accelerated evolution, because there's a lot of good things going on. But I would say it is a hot topic now. I think curriculums around the world, government bodies around the world, they are watching. They know they need to do something different because of everything that we've discussed today. So I think it just comes back to that balance. But Robert mentioned parents got a huge responsibility here. Children at school, 15% of their waking hours. We are educated, we are influenced, we have all of those conversations with our parents at home. It's not just our school's responsibility. So the best thing that we can do is put positive pressure on our schools to keep evolving, but I think as parents put positive pressure on ourselves, to be a little bit more open-minded. Some of the statistics Robert started off right at the beginning about our own education, it's so different to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we've all got a role to play here, not just our schools around the world.
Can I add one more thing to that, just in terms of your daughter or anybody else's daughter? I'm a bit like Victoria, I failed my maths. I'm sorry, everyone. I failed my maths GCSE twice. I don't think Robert is now looking at me as to why are you on the board then? It's never done me any harm. However, I now contribute to billion SAR budgets. Now that might be because I've added an extra naught where there shouldn't be one, it might be a million. But really, honestly, you get through that stuff, it's part of it. But I think the comment I would make about, and it's a plea to parents, please, because we went all through the grading system, we tend to have it in our own heads too. I want you to be an A student, I want you to get this grade. I think if we can together, as educators and parents, all of us say, okay, this is what happened today. This is what you said, Victoria. The moment you fail an examination, the moment you get something wrong, the next day, you are an improving person from that. So I think that's where I'd leave it.
And I think just as David said exactly what I was going to say about the parents, but actually it's also as employers, when we put our employer hat on, so often we all see adverts nowadays, requiring X, Y, and Z, academic skills or exact experience. You must have had at least 4 years experience in HR or something. Actually, and they put, there's lip service paid to the transferable soft skills. As employers, let's look at, I hate the word soft skills, but let's look at those soft skills. They are often far more important. Yes, we need technical skills, we all know that. But as employers, we have a responsibility as well. It's everyone's responsibility.
Okay, next question, please.
Hello, shall I go ahead and speak? My name is Khadija Al-Manah. First of all, thank you for organizing such a great conference. So I work at a fairly new school, and I'm part of the leadership team. I've had a chat with Pam, but I'd love to hear from the rest of you. What is one piece of advice you would give to new school leaders or principals, head teachers, whatever that word is in your country? So what is one piece of advice you'd give a new principal, based on maybe your personal experiences or your personal observations, maybe collaborating with schools and working in that field? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go across the panel. Mr. Cody.
I want to be funny, but I don't know if it's appropriate, to be honest. Good luck is what I would say. It is one of the most incredibly challenging jobs in the world, being a principal or a leader of a school, because you're dealing with human beings with unbelievably different interests. You have parents who have an interest, you have teachers who have an interest, and you have students who have an interest. And sometimes they don't align. So it is unbelievably challenging. A support group, a WhatsApp friend group, that kind of thing, because as a leader, it's important to know that so much good is going on, but our brains are based on the negative. You know, our brains are trained to see the negative to keep us alive, so it's critical that you get out and see the positive. So as a future values-based school, it sounds unbelievably exciting. Be clear, be excited, and enjoy it, but know that there's going to be challenging times, but keep a chart on how many good times they are, because there's way more good times.
Thanks, Rob. David?
Yeah, congratulations. I did a talk on Saturday, and I kind of gave a conclusion on the 3 E's of the CEO, but I think it's relevant for any leader, any person, and it just builds on the comment there. I think that you're a chief emotion officer, your chief energy officer, and your chief education officer. So particularly in education, you are handling so much emotion in one building every single day with students, teachers, and parents, right? You never know what's going to happen in a school. You're one knock on the door from something crazy going on, and all of your plan for the day is got to be thrown out the window. So you've got emotion, right? You've got to constantly think about your own emotion. How do you bring your best positive view in every single day? I'm a big believer how you start and end your day is critical to that. Secondly, energy. I'm a big believer that energy makes the world go round. You can have energy in difficult situations and energy in good situations as well, but maintaining that energy, making positive ripples day in, day out, that comes back to what you eat, what you drink, how you sleep. That is critical for any leader. And the last one, education. You see a lot of leaders get into a position of leadership, and they forget that they can continue to learn, right? Education doesn't have to stop. And the 3 things that I try to do is continue to read, right, which is difficult. I continue to listen. I love the rise of the podcast. And then the last thing is surrounding yourself with great people as well. Friends, family, people that you can inspire off, get that energy from. You can learn a lot from them and their particular story. So that's emotion, energy, and educate.
Thank you. Dr. Ghanim?
Yeah, so I have nothing to do with education in general, but these are like my observations, specifically with technology. So as a school leader or someone in the education field, you have to look at technology as having opportunities and the threats at the same time. So I was discussing with some of my colleagues here that I've seen some people trying to introduce technology and rush. For example, I work at the Qatar Foundation, and we have like many pre-university education departments and so on. And then one of the major projects that they're trying to work on is to introduce AI in schools. And one of the major projects is they figured out that there is like some sort of bad performance in terms of teaching Arabic language in the school. And then they tried to come up with solutions such as Grammarly, but for Arabic language. And they wanted to introduce that to primary school students. And like the people who were behind the project thought that was a great idea. But what trying in my mind is that would it really help the students, like primary grade 1, grade 2, to have Grammarly, fixing their grammar and fixing, let's say, whatever they write? Because, I mean, the synonymous for that is giving a grade 1 or a grade 2 a calculator, for example, and assume that, his maths would improve. And at the same time, we have seen like people on the other end of the spectrum, trying to ban ChatGPT, for example, from universities or schools because, they think it would affect, it's like their assessments and so on. So the problem is not usually with the technology, but with everything is surrounding the technology. So, for example, with the assessments, the problem is likely the assessments themselves, not the ChatGPT, enabling students to plagiarize or, write, it's like a whole essays using ChatGPT or computers. So my advice would be, to really have critical understanding of what technology can do and not rush either to implement or ban these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam?
Yeah, I mean, we have had a chat and it's lovely, and I really envy you starting out there. Just one, which is never, ever, ever forget why you have a school. If anything you do on any given day doesn't impact all of your children in a positive way, ask yourself, why did I do that? what could I have done better? Whether you're ordering food, telling someone what colour to paint the walls, or you're making a budget decision, or you're driving to a meeting. Are you going to that meeting because the outcome of it ultimately will be the best for your children? If you forget that, then the whole thing collapses.
It's very kind of you to ask for advice. I think that there are two things from my head and one thing from my heart. So from my head, the research really says very clearly that to succeed in school administration, the two things you must do most consistently are to provide for yourself to have a situational awareness, to know what's going on. Because leaders who are isolated and disconnected from the real lived lives of the institution will fail. Always have done, always will do. The second thing is to set a culture of very consistent and clear high expectations and to provide people feedback about their ability to reach the expectations, because students, teachers, people will only rise to the level that they're expected and challenged to reach. So those are the things I know from research. From my own heart, I would say, like in real estate, we say location, location, location matters for success. In the schools business, it's a people business, so it's relationships, relationships, relationships. And if people don't trust you, it won't matter how smart you are or how well you do, nothing good will happen.
Leads very nicely on. So the mentor, the support network, 100%. It's a very lonely place at the top. But linked to that is that relationship. Being at the top is very lonely, but actually you're not on your own. You've got a really big support network ready-made, whether it's friends, family relations, whether it's colleagues in other schools or other businesses or immediate people within your team. I think that communication is really important, which leads again onto my second thing, which is sense of perspective. Things will go wrong. You will say the wrong thing. You will employ the wrong person. You will paint the wall the wrong color. Whatever it is, things will happen. Allow yourself that 5-minute moan when you're completely irrational. You don't want advice from anyone. You just want to be able to go, or feel sorry or cry or whatever. But then use that network, communicate, talk to other people, and let them realize you're human. You know, exactly what you're saying. It's be yourself and enjoy it. That's the most important thing. Why are you doing it? You're doing it for the students, for the children. Enjoy it. So yeah, good luck.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Honestly, golden. Every advice that you guys have given, I appreciate it.
Next question.
Hello, I'm Abhilasha. I work for the Ministry of Education, Qatar. A couple of questions have already been answered, and you guys were great on that. Still a question in my mind is that how do you build capacities at schools? I mean, this is mostly for the educators and for the school leaders, that they develop partnerships with the communities around, and how do you use that partnership for students learning? Because that's very important. With COVID, we have come to know that these informal learning ecosystems are really important for our children, and they contribute a lot towards their learning. So how do schools work, and how do curriculum or education system with what you're working with, how do they deal with developing those partnerships and use it for learning? And I'm talking mainly about elementary school stage.
I'll just something to start. I think it's the age of networks, and so schools like Pam has talked about for young children, schools already have amazing networks that probably we don't take advantage of. And if we're thinking back to AI again, it's about making connections between unexpected places that powers the machines which make this work. So I mean, I was thinking, Pam, about career education. I mean, the first thing that little children do is to build a town, and they think about who's in the town and what do the people in the town do, and their parents have jobs. Probably, right? And so who do they know and where do they work and what do their businesses do? So building that capacity, I think, is first an awareness of what resources are available, and purposefully building that network of community connections and people. I mean, the school has lots of vendors. So people the the school buys things from lots of people. All of them make things and do things and have jobs. All the people who work in the school or are teachers do things and have jobs that you might be able to look in to find to do. So my place to start would be, again, to take David's point, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution of understanding the resources you have and taking those first and building on them. And it doesn't cost a lot of money, it just takes a little bit of time and the will to connect with people and to build the networks, because thinking of the Arctic journey, you didn't do that by yourself, right? There was not a single thing. You had lots of teams working together. So that would be what I would say, is we build the capacity by starting on our strengths and building there, finding little fires and fanning them, and then helping people and institutions and businesses and parents to connect with each other, because it doesn't take a big national program. It just takes people connecting to people, is where I would start.
And David, partnerships?
Yeah, I'll kick in here because it's something I'm obviously passionate about. I think partnerships are going to be key to the next 10, 20, 30 years. They've always been key. One of the challenges that you had, I hate the word supplier, like in education, like suppliers. That those people servicing the sector, supporting schools, they're creating businesses and solutions around problems that they've identified that schools could or couldn't need. So I think we're moving into the era of great partnerships being formed. We need to kind of break some of the behaviours where schools try and do everything themselves, or governments try and do everything themselves. You don't need to. You might not be the best people for it, but collaboration and great partnerships, I think, are the way forward. And probably everybody on this stage is on this stage because of a connection or a network or meeting people, and those partnerships have been formed over months, years, or if not decades. But that's what we've got to continue to do. So I think from a ministry's point of view, a school's point of view, a parent's point of view, we've got to look at partners as part of the fabric of a school. It's not the school and partners. We like to position ourselves and talk to us as a partner of a school when we're working with them. But it doesn't just have to be regional now as well. We've got that very exciting opportunity of international collaborations where schools, governments can work with businesses and partnerships all around the world now because of tech. So everybody's got to buy into it, right? And if we do that, we can bring great experiences into our schools and give our students more experiences of what they need to do. But we've got to make sure we do not use the word supplier. Okay, these are critical engines to the education industries, the partners out there which can help explode experiences for students in a good way.
That's amazing. I mean, that makes us think, how powerful the community and the parents and everyone involved in the co-creation of the curricula, the resources, and you said partnerships we develop. And we have a holistic, educational program which is developed and delivered not just by teachers, but by everyone around us. Yeah, thank you.
If I could just share, because this is my 9th year in Qatar. Everything is here if you want to partner with somebody. Universities, museums, it is all here. So you need to be relentless. You need to be absolutely relentless and keep trying to make those connections, because it's here. The other thing you need to do is, as a leader, is keep asking the question, have you called the hospital? Have you called the museum? Because it's not necessarily on everybody's front mind. They're busy doing their own thing. So those are the first two critical parts. It is just an unbelievable gift to be in this country with everything's here. And one of the big parts of hiring is hiring diversity. If you get diversity, you'll expand your networks. And for us, I think that's what's been great at ACS Doha, is our diverse staff has contacted and made connections with groups we didn't even know existed or were here.
Yes, I reiterate everything everyone said, but I'd also say look beyond just education and that side of the community. I was just smiling to myself when people were answering the questions, looking at, a lot of my friends on the stage here and thinking that we met in all sorts of odd circumstances, not necessarily education. So there's a huge amount out there, and we don't look at it because we automatically go down the education route. Apart from suppliers and museums, all of those have a slight connection to education, which is great, but there's plenty out there that isn't and doesn't. And if it's a dead end, then great. I mean, lots of my colleagues here read far more than I do. You know, that's my determination for this year. But when I do read, I tend not to read education books. I tend to read business books or sports books or things that interest me. And then you suddenly find something that's actually about education without being overtly so. So I think it's be broad-minded, be open-minded, find the partnerships where no one else has. That's what opens the doors for students.
Thank you, panel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. A couple more questions. Here at the front, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Salman and I work at ACS as a digital teaching and learning coordinator, but I'm wearing my parent hat to ask this question. I have two questions. One is, we know that when we look at learning, in fact, teaching happens in class for 45 minutes in a period. Like, for example, I'm talking about maths, English, maybe 1 hour, and then that changes to a different class, different subject. So it's an hour in one subject area, then another subject, and so on and so forth, right? But when we look at the learning happens 24/7, 365 days a year. So not necessarily a student just learning for 45 minutes in a class and go back home and that's it, done. So the question is that how do you see technology, and we've talked about artificial intelligence, we've talked about augmented reality, and so many different technologies coming up in the future. How do you see technology will aid students learn, not only in school, but at home as well, and not just during the day for 1 period or 2 periods, but throughout the day? Do you see there's something AI-based will be out there or is out there that is going to help students learn all the time, cognitive and non-cognitive, both sides? That is my question, number one. The second one is, again, as a parent, we see students passing and failing, right? Sometimes scores. We've talked about grades and report cards and transcripts and admissions in the universities. But in fact, there is nothing as such pass and fail, right? Students have different learning styles and needs. We know that there are techniques in place like teachers try practicing differentiation in class, there's adaptive learning, there's personalized learning, there are different models, right? And in a class with 20 students with 20 different learning needs, sometimes it's difficult, right? So the question is, how do you see technology technology, AI-based system, or I don't know, in the coming days or years? There's something out there in the market which would help students who have different learning styles and learning needs, help them success. So rather we say, well, this student is struggling in this subject, nobody's struggling, but maybe we are not really meeting that student's learning style or learning needs. So these are the two questions. I just wanted to hear from you. What do you think about it?
Just breaking that down into tech, I think maybe there's the challenge with the 45, 50-minute slot is the approach the vast majority of schools around the world do. And that's because we're still asking too much from our schools, hence the timetabled approach to cramming it all in. The problem with that approach is not the units of learning. It kills creativity, because every time a flow of a lesson gets going, the bell goes, and then a child has to go to the next lesson, the next lesson, the next lesson. And some of the most creative ideas are not achieved in that manner. Is when you've got that free-flowing opportunity. So before answering the question or passing the question over about tech, what I would like to see is get rid of the timetable, get rid of the actual school bell in schools a little bit more, free up more time for super lessons, extra project, let lessons run a little bit longer, because you often hear stories of teachers who just want to stop a lesson and answer a very curious question, but it wasn't in the lesson plan because we're asking too much from that teacher. So I think in the future, it's not necessarily answering the question from a tech perspective. I would like to see more free time in timetable for creative opportunity. So we just do not continue to have the Spock approach because it's not helping the creativity of the problem solving. Maybe tech will be helpful in that space, but it also requires government organizations to make, someone's got to make a big, bold statement out there in one of the governments around the world about freeing up schools to have a little bit more time to do that. So I'd love to see that happen one day.
Thank you. Dr. Ghanim?
Yeah, so I'll speak as a person involved in the tech industry, not as an educator, and as a parent. So I'm a parent of 3. So if we are talking about the impact of technology in general, if we can dissect it, it would be on the educational provider, on the teachers, and on the students. So on the educational providers, it will be mostly on, the way schools are assessing students. And specifically, we spoke about ChatGPT. If the only way you assess students with are like some sort of essays, then probably you need to change the kind of assessment, because ChatGPT can write essays on behalf of the students. Now, if we talk about the teachers themselves, I don't know about how foreign schools are run here, but I know about the teachers in Qatari schools, like run by the Ministry of Education, and the majority of them actually complain not about the teaching load, but about the extra activities that they have to do. The grading, the extracurricular activities they have to do outside the class, and so on. So the use of technology actually might help them to avoid, these repetitive tasks such as grading the students' work, or planning the lessons and so on. But if we come to the students themselves, technology can help them in many different ways. So there are many tech companies that specialize in, some sort of games in which you can play with the technology, and then gives you some sort of personalized learning based on the outcomes of the games and so on. And obviously you have, these online platforms, Coursera, Khan Academy, and all sorts of these technologies that help the students, but shouldn't be necessarily AI. For example, my son the other day was surprised, like he knows the flags of all the countries in the world, and that was from a YouTuber, not from a learning channel or something like that. A YouTuber was playing a game in which he had to guess the name of the flags of every country in the world, and all of a sudden my son knows the flags of the world. So technology shouldn't be purposefully focusing on education, or you find someone telling you this app will help you learn X, Y, and Z, but getting exposure, to the different kind of technology, YouTube channels, and so on, would help the students to increase their knowledge.
And I would just like to add, Salman never asks easy questions. He works for us, so we know the kinds of questions that he asks, and they're always good ones. Well, what I think is important to understand is that the technology are just as good as as good at tools as the craftspeople who use them. And so a lot of the pedagogies that are involved that digital learning and teaching makes possible, and a lot of the tools already exist and they're just fine. It's just that we have a hard time getting people to use them, because it's quite a mind shift. When you talk to teachers, and think about this for your own self and the teachers that you had as a child, some 80% of the way teachers teach is determined by the way they were taught. So if we're expecting people to change, this is a huge change in human behavior, thinking about how we do those things, I think we're not waiting for new technologies to be created so much as for the tools that are evolving to be deployed in a way that's effective. I mean, all the stuff is there, all the pieces are there. We just have to find people who are committed to putting the pieces together, giving them the time and the energy, and expecting of the teaching profession that it is not a chat GPT sort of function to be a teacher. It requires understanding of human development and of technology and of pedagogy and how those things work together, plus a commitment from school leaders who will make sure that those expectations are happening and changing. The technology will not be a magic bullet. It will always be the people deploying it and the purpose for which it's deployed.
I think what I'd add to that is, and I see myself as a technological dinosaur. I've had to learn everything I've learned literally while I'm doing it, which is obviously the best way to do it. This question comes up an awful lot. It's two things really. The question about time, this idea that 45 minutes or 30 minutes is a block and then you go away. I think two things. I think we all together have responsibility to think about what that means. No one ever, you saw the child with the picture of the Picasso quote beside her. Nobody ever said to Picasso, you've got 10 more minutes to finish that masterpiece, and then you need to go out to play, and then you need to do your math. but somebody did actually teach him the math that sat behind whatever he did. So I think we need to look at a week in a different way. I think we need to look at what time means and allowing students time for it to settle. I always look at, there was some research I was looking at, the effect of music on the brain. And if you listen to music, when you walk away from it, you switch it off, it's still playing in your brain. That's the best way I can describe it. I'm no neuroscientist. And with the technology, I was talking to our esteemed colleague this morning, and my sense is technology has to become the nervous system, the infrastructure, but we have to give time to that. You're right, Robert, because new strategies are bolted on. It's, okay, there you go, we've trained you to use chat, we've trained you to use AI, off you go. But then teachers see it as a bolt on to what they do. We need to take the time to help people see it as the infrastructure, the exoskeleton is what we do on the outside.
I'd love to see time being monitored. Time is the biggest problem in education across the planet, but not a single school across the planet has got a chief time officer looking at how they're spending time, using time, saving time, being more productive. You know, we're constantly fighting for it back, but 5 minutes saving every day, 10 minutes saving every day can have a profound impact. So it's a big area, just having that time, but we don't have anybody ever appreciating small minutes do make a big difference. So I'd like to see chief time officers in school.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you. So I get two things from here. One is looking at the times, like times, see it in a different way. And the second is what I hear, or I'm processing it side by side, a kind of in-class teachers are kind of a facilitator. And there's stuff that students are engaged in. Teachers are facilitating students.
Absolutely. So schools is the junior partner to education, because students are in school for a relatively small time. And it's really our job as parents to hand off the lifelong learning to the student, because they have to be in charge of their own learning, as a matter of fact. And they'll learn far more at home than they will at school, as a matter of fact, both from what parents and families teach them in that context, and also what they decide to learn for themselves, like your son, who learned all the flags. Whatever you decide to learn, you can, and schools can be much more of a bridge, right, from learning from school to home, a bridge to get there, and technology is a really important bridge and a springboard, and so that you can jump off into the deep water for your own worlds.
Thank you so much.
Thing to think about. I really thought I cracked it as an educator when my eldest granddaughter said to me, she was about 6 or 7, she said to me, "I've decided, Granny, when I grow up, I want to do what you do for a job." And I was so proud. I thought, she wants to be a teacher. This is amazing. And I said, "That's fantastic, Jasmine. What made you want to be a teacher?" And she said, "Oh, are you a teacher?" She said, "I just thought you wore high heels and went to work on an aeroplane." Failed.
Nice closing thought. If you do have any more questions, the iPad is at the sign-up. We're going to ask our team of presenters to come and sit more comfortably, not in the spotlight, and Mr. Cody will finish with his closing remarks.
Thank you, speakers, for sharing your passion for education, innovation, technology, people. Professional singer. We heard a professional singer today. We didn't hear her sing, but the HR person said she was a professional singer. And then I have had a hard time finding the word for, I have suffering, I have risk taker, but what's the word? Help me. And thank you for sharing your passion for grabbing every opportunity. It has been a wonderful day, and thank you for also taking the time out to present and speak with our audience, and for your continued dedication to the education of your fields. The passion you bring shows here today. The ACS 2040 Future Skills event brought together industry experts and market researchers to provide valuable insights
on how to prepare our children for the future. The discussions highlighted the need to equip our children with critical thinking, creativity, adaptability, and resilience to thrive in an ever-evolving landscape. However, one crucial aspect that stood out was the importance of promoting a love for learning and a lifelong learning experience. Lifelong learning is about acquiring new knowledge and developing the skills and mindset needed to learn continuously throughout one's life. Cultivating a culture of curiosity, exploration, and inquiry from a young age is essential to instilling a love for learning in our children. Providing a lifelong learning opportunity enables our children to adapt to new challenges and take advantage of emerging opportunities in the future. But more importantly, to make a difference for them, their family, and the world around them. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the parents and industry leaders who understood the importance of taking the time today to be better informed and to assist their children in forming their own paths in the future. Your participation and engagement in the ACS 2040 Future Skills event demonstrate a commitment to improving our children's future. I do have two takeaways. Do we have, I'm going to ask this wrong, so apologies. Do we have any young parents in here? That means parents who have children, say, grade 6 or below. Could you raise your hand? Okay. For those who have older, maybe you've experienced this, but this is one takeaway. It's a warning. Be ready when you ask your child what they want to be, because you don't know what they're going to say. And I'm going to recommend this. Have it in your head before you do it. I'm going to ask you what you're going to be. Take that big, deep breath. Because my son, if you know my wife and I, we're not pacifists, but I think we're on that pacifist scale. And the first time we asked him what he wanted to be an army man. We took a deep breath. Sounds good. How do you work for that? Seemed pretty easy. My wife and I, we had this. My daughter, football player, football player, football player, and then she hit us. Hey, what do you want to be? I want to be a tattoo artist. I was ready. I took a big, deep breath. That sounds like a great opportunity for an artist like you. She's in art school, and she still wants to be a tattoo artist. But it was one of those things, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that moment of breath, because I truly was not very excited. However, that's about me, not her, which is the other takeaway. It is about them and not about you. So be ready for that answer when you get it, because they're going to be living this life, and that's your job, is to feed their passion, to put them on that track so they can do what they're passionate about. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Listen well, feed their passion, let them struggle, and be ready and willing to change. Only together we can ensure that our children have the skills, mindset, and opportunities to thrive in an increasingly complex and uncertain world. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Mr. John, anything else? Excellent job, Mr. John, and thank you, everybody, for setting up this wonderful event.